All right, according to the information on my screen, we are about to go live. I just want to make sure it shows up on. It's always a delay seeing it on. For whatever reason, doing this thing to Facebook Live, there's always a slight delay. Okay, so now it says live over here. Let's make sure that this is live. Let me just click on it. It says I'm live now. Seeing it on, yep, for whatever reason, doing this thing to Facebook Live. Go. Let me mute that. Okay, so we're going live, people. We'll do it live. So we're getting ready to start Retro Talk, episode 3. This is a special edition of CoCoTALK After Dark. So here we go. Live from the internet, it's Retro Talk, a special edition of CoCoTALK After Dark. And here we go. We're here. We are live. We are here with Retro Talk, and welcome. Oh, that's the wrong button. Well, it is. It is after dark, and we are getting along in age. So,
maybe I should do this.
Do me a favor, poke him with the stick, see if he's still breathing. Welcome to Retro Talk. We've got a couple of people already out there in the live stream, so thank you. Watching us right now on Facebook. We've got Ken Reighard, we've got Al Hartman, and Garrett Myers has just joined us. And right now we've got a small but proud panel, and hopefully more of our CoCo talkers will join us in the near future. And you know, if you guys want to join us who are watching us live right now, you need to add us as a Skype contact, right? So it's CoCoTALK at CoCoTALK.live. So with us, let's just introduce who's on our panel right now. We'll start with the biggest celebrity in the land of retro computing, and that would be Ron Delvaux. So since some of the people who are watching us don't know who you are, Ron, because they're not probably watching CoCoTALK every week, why don't you do a little brief introduction about, you know, who you are and what you do right now?
I'm just an ex-sign artist from Rochester, New York. Moved to Arizona. Took all my computers with me. Been collecting them since day one when I got a, sorry to say, MC10. It was my first computer. My second one was a complete CoCo 2, excuse me. It wasn't even CoCo 2. It's a CoCo 1 gray. It was a gray interface, TV, dual drives, and a printer for $300 that I bought from my wife's boss. So that's how I got started, and then I started collecting stuff. And I've had a garage full of stuff for a long time that I've carried from one place to another as I moved. And I keep rotating my stuff. I play with different things. Could be my Model 4P, my Model 4, my Model 2000, Model 1000.
Yeah, your mic is really wonky right now, Ron. I know you moved it behind you, but like I am hearing like all kinds of weird sounds coming out of the back of your head or something. But
or maybe it's touching my shirt.
Yeah, it could be.
It could be because
if you turn down the gain of your microphone, you can put it back closer to your mouth.
I don't know that I can do that. So.
That's okay. That's okay. But yeah, so for those who you know, we do a regular weekly show on Saturday afternoons. It's called CoCoTALK, and we mostly talk about the Tandy color computer. And Ron, you joined us a while ago, and you just started showing off your vintage computing collection from your garage. We actually created a segment around you called Ron's Garage. So every week we get to see one of your systems. You've got basically a small museum of vintage systems. Most of them, you know, that are Tandy based, but a lot of cool stuff. And you have created a couple of Facebook pages. Now you've got a Ron's Garage Facebook page. You've got an OS9 Facebook page. Show us your color computer Facebook page, right? So,
yeah.
Yeah. So how would you describe yourself as would you describe yourself as a collector?
Well, I've had these things for a long time, so I've already collected them, and I'm not currently buying much of anything lately.
Right.
And
Right.
but I do like some of these new gadgets and gizmos that are coming out. I have the SDC, which I pop in. I have a setup here in my spare room, and then I've got a setup in. I have like a little observatory building in the backyard that I'm also an amateur astronomer, and I do take pictures of the sky and stuff. So sometimes I'm up way late and get up way early sometimes. So I don't do a lot of sleep. But, I wind up doing stuff with that, and my color computers and Tandy 1000 are set up in the 12 by 12 building in the back. And so I'll bring my SDC out back there, or I have tons of floppies, and most of my stuff is floppy based in the observatory. And I've gone through and taken some of my more precious things and put them on as DSK files, and so I can put them on the SDC. The SDC is an awesome piece of work.
Yep. For those who are not aware of that, we can talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool. Probably a good introduction for the one or two people who don't already know who Ron Delvaux is, the Timberman of Ron's Garage. So Al Hartman also has a Facebook group called Computer Place, and Al says, "I'm like Ron. I've got a lot of systems here." Some people might refer to that as having a problem, but others we call it a hobby. So I guess it's all in how you look at it. And for those of you who are watching us live, there's 15 people watching us live right now. Anybody's free to call in on Skype if you want to join the conversation. And we're going to talk about all things retro. Also with us on the panel, a very obscure person who made a couple of indie titles back in the day.
Just a few.
So, Al, I see that you're calling me in. I see that you're calling out, but I can't add you to the call until you add us as a contact. You need to add CoCoTALK. Here we go. You're trying to call me. I can't add you to the call, Al. You got to add me as a contact. Sorry. So try again. That's the one. It's not my rules. It's Skype rules, right? You got to be a contact before I can add you to a group call. So also with us on the panel, the lovely, the talented, the legendary from sunny Southern California, Mr. Steve Bjork is with us. How are you, Steve?
Oh, hanging in. Not doing too bad these days. Yeah, I definitely been around in the industry for a while, both creating video arcade games for the arcade, in addition to different game systems, whether it be stuff from Tandy, Atari, Sony, Nintendo. Oh, the whole gambit, I guess you'd say.
Just a few things, yeah. So
yeah, just a few.
Just a few things. So yeah, so the us in the CoCo community and the color computer community, we are most familiar with Steve Bjork's work as just a number of AAA titles, commercial quality stuff for the CoCo. Right before the show, we were talking about Audio Spectrum Analyzer, one of his first products, because somebody recently did a video on that. Maybe we can talk about that today. And he's done a lot of great things for us. And okay, it says it's waiting for us to accept our invitation. Well, I'm going to try this real quick. Okay, I see Al Hartman. Add to contacts. Okay, we're adding Al to contacts. Here we go. I'm going to try to now add you to the call if I can, Al Hartman. This is, here we go. Al Hartman's calling in. It's just weird. It's not letting me add you to the call, Al. You also need to make sure, unfortunately, again, not my rules, but you got to have the latest version of Skype. Let me see if I can add you to the screen. Add people to this call. Al Hartman. Oh, see, that's weird. Okay, Alan Hartman. Add to group call. I'm trying right now. I'm trying to add you to the group call. Al Hartman, do you got a copy on us?
Yes, I do.
All right.
Great. Well, you got to love modern technology, right?
Yep. Hey, Steve Bjork, you and I met at a CoCo Rainbow Fest in Texas many years ago when I used to work for Bob Rosen of Spectrum Project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you had with you a CoCo in a TDP 100 case with a small TV and a built-in disk drive. It was like a portable CoCo. It was the coolest thing I had ever seen to date.
Yeah, that TV was actually 80-column terminal.
It was very cool, and you were showing us a whole bunch of your games on it. We were sitting there in the reception area of the hotel. It was so much fun.
Yeah, yeah. Well, those were definitely old days, and the one and only Rainbow Fest that was ever held in Fort Worth because of the lack of attendance.
Yep. Well, yeah. Bob Rosen and I stormed Tandy Tower, being ex-Tandy employees.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it got us anywhere.
Yeah.
Did you make it to the breakfast?
I don't remember. It's so long ago.
Yeah, that's the thing is, Tandy decided in their infamous wisdom for the Rainbow Fest to have a guy from marketing talk to the folks there at the show. He thought he was talking to a bunch of Radio Shack store managers, not color computer enthusiasts. And he was just doing all sorts of marketing terminology, profit and loss statements, all this stuff that the average consumer could give a damn about. And he went on for about an hour and a half. And when he finally said, in conclusion, there was a big round of applause. I really felt sorry for him.
Well, you know, in Bob Rosen's case, he was talking to a former Radio Shack manager. He used to manage the store on Woodhaven Boulevard. And
Very cool. Let me say hi to a few people also in the live chat right now. So our good friend from Australia, Brian Joyce from Extructus Productions, says hello after darkers. Also,
hello.
Nick Marotta is with us again for the second time today. Hey, Nick. And, of course, Ken Reighard, brother of Jason Reighard, says, has anyone ever won the Audio Spectrum Analyzer? It's a lot more abstract of a game than Neutroid. I believe I currently am the high score holder. I think I have dethroned Billy Mitchell on Audio Spectrum Analyzer just recently. So, so we'll be talking about a lot of stuff, and we were talking about Steve. It's really hard to give a brief introduction on Steve Bjork. He's done so many things, and most of us in the color computer world are just happy he'd made cool CoCo games. But he's done a lot of things for a lot of systems outside of the color computer. But since we also have somebody new to the show, Al Hartman, I am familiar with you to a small degree just by your page on Facebook and a few retro groups we have in common. But do you want to give a little mini life story about what you did then and what you do now?
Do we have enough time?
Keep it brief.
Seriously, I bought my first computer, a TRS-80 Model 1, in 1979. And through the Brooklyn Computer Club King's Bite, when I put my, in my expansion interface, when I put my Percom doubler in, I was introduced to Stuart Neufeld, who worked for Stony Clove Computer Center. And Stuart opened up eventually Zebra Systems, who made the CoCo greeting card designer, CoCo graphics designer, lots of stuff for all the different Tandy, Timex, Amiga, Atari computers. And through Stuart, I met Bob Rosen, and I worked for Bob Rosen at Spectrum Projects for a while. I went back and forth between Zebra and Spectrum, and Color, Alpha Products and Colorware was right next door to Zebra, so I also worked with Colorware on and off, helping out over there. And I don't know. I'm like Ron. I have a huge computer collection here. You know, Dragons, CoCos, TRS-80 Model 1, LNW-80, a Model 4, Amiga 500s, Amiga 1000,
Wow.
a couple of Commodore 64s, a couple of Atari 800, the XLs, Commodore 128. I I just uncovered my ZX81 today. I have an American Spectrum. I have the prototype of the Spectrum that I got when I worked at Zebra Systems. I have a Timex 2068. God, I can't even name all. A couple of Apple II GSs.
Wow.
A Laser 128. I don't know. You name it, I probably have it.
Very cool.
Lately, I've been playing with my Amigas, trying to fix them. They're both down. And I just bought Amiga Forever 7, which is really cool. Been having a lot of fun with that.
That's cool. So it sounds like you got a couple of systems. And so would you consider yourself a hobbyist, an enthusiast, a collector, a preserver, or
all of the above?
All of the above. But at no particular time would you say that you have a problem, correct?
If you talk to my sister, yes. I'm not married, so my sister is the closest thing I have to a wife. And her feeling is, if I ever go into a hospital for good or pass away, she's just going to put a dumpster out in front of my house and dig up the back of the house and tip it all in. And I'm like, don't do that.
Say it isn't so.
Name 10 people you can call, and at least one of them will come with a U-Haul and take it all.
Where do you live?
I'd rather it go to somebody than go into the dumpster.
Where do you live?
I live in Keensburg, New Jersey, not far from Wall Township, where they just had a show out here, the Vintage Computer Festival East. And I was in the hospital, I couldn't go, but I wanted to go. They're great guys. I got some of my systems from the Vintage Computer Festival.
Ron Delvaux, Grant Leighty says, "What's for dinner? It looks good." we saw you being handed
you
a
saw
plate.
it come down. That's what I'm going to do. Yeah, look. All right, I'll show you. Okay.
What's for dinner today in Ron's garage? Today on Ron's plate. We got some green peas, some rice.
My wife brought it for me.
Ah, that looks good, Ron.
Yes,
it does look good. I'm drinking a pina colada, so I've got a liquid meal here right now. So that's cool. Cool. So Al, what do you do these days? I know you've got one of your pages called Computer Place, but what else are you doing right now in the current retro communities?
I've been on the VCF forum, and I was just on a Model 1 page on Facebook, a new page that I just joined. I just try to poke my nose in and help people out, give them links to things, tell them where they can find things.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just posted to someone, wanted to know where to get a TRS-80 cassette cable, which you can get on eBay all the time. I bought a nice one from a guy in the UK who's a Dragon guy, and he makes them. And because I lost my original cable. It's here somewhere in a box. I just don't know where. And I didn't want to use the one that came with my new Dragon, because I'm probably going to resell that, because I bought that to use the power supply for my original. I have the Dragon 64 prototype from Tano. They gave it to Bob Rosen, the American version, the NTSC Dragon 64, and Bob sold it to me. But I don't know how many of you know Bob Rosen personally. No. Steve does. Steve will laugh at this. Bob Rosen stripped it of everything socketed and sold it on his website, or at the time, his Rainbow Ads. So I got a denuded Dragon 64 that had no ROMs, no processor, no SAM chip, nothing. And I had to repopulate it and burn a new set of ROMs. But it works great. I even made a replacement label. He stripped off the label. It had no label. I take that back. It had no Dragon label because it was a prototype. It was in the Dragon 32 case.
Well, Rosen's from New York, and out there, if you sit there and you buy something from one of their stores, let's say you buy yourself a VCR, you have to buy the remote as an extra item. That's just the way they do business back in New York.
Well, internal to Spectrum, we all had nicknames, and Bob's nickname was Cheap Dog.
Mm-hmm.
He could pinch a penny and get 20 cents out of it.
I think the old...
Well, did you know he came out to Silicon Valley for a while?
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
And boy, he sure hightailed it back. He
Yeah,
just couldn't stand the environment.
So he came out there, moved the bulletin boards out there, and then he came back here. And the last I heard, he got married, and he ran something called Spectrum Sports, selling sports memorabilia. But I haven't heard from him in 20 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
Stuart, I just spoke to last week from Zebra Systems.
Yeah, and he's one of the guys that left the community a long time ago.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
But, you know, he was a major contributor to the community with all the software products and all the hardware, and he was one of the main guys back in the day.
Yeah, well, also, if you remember, he had a lot of ad pages in every issue of Rainbow, and this is what a lot of people were upset about, is that Rainbow paid favoritism to folks, and he was practically getting those page at cost.
Well, he and Lonnie were very good friends.
Right, yeah, he was getting, you know, Lonnie would make his money off the other guys. I remember Datasoft putting some ads in, and they were pretty pricey.
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah,
here's Rosen. 1984 at Rainbow Fest.
Yeah.
I have a picture of me and Bob. I'm afraid to share it because I look like the Wolfman.
Datasoft took out several full-page ads in there from time to time in Rainbow. Then we found out that we were paying more than what what he was paying for 7 or 8 pages. And we weren't too happy about that.
Wow.
Well, I can imagine.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think we've got a lead-in story. We'll talk about the potentially soon to be released Atari VCS. But we'll take a quick break. And we'll run a sponsor break for just a second. So, we'll be back in about a minute or so. So if you got to go tinkle or take a biological break, please do. But I think the first thing we'll talk about tonight is the this new thing calling itself the Atari system. Right after these words. So thank you all for being here, and we'll be back in just a minute.
CoCoTALK After Dark.
I'm from CoCo Fest, and you listen to The Real Gamer, Steve Schroe.
You could get yourself a deluxe travel mug like this with the CoCoTALK logo on it. You might even be able to get yourself a DVD like this with over 2 hours of gameplay.
Ken's asking if you have compromising pictures of Lonnie.
Make the world great again by enjoying some quality retro merchandise and CoCo nostalgia. So please visit 8bit256.com and let's make the world great for the color computer. Thank you very much.
CoCo2, c'est le coq champion, des micros il donne le pion. Pour le jeu il est pas battable, les études c'est pas disable. L'expansion il adore ça, les commandes tu vas voir ça. Notre CoCo est programmable, pour tes cours c'est bien serviable. CoCo2 de Radio Shack, ton affaire est dans le sac.
Un ordinateur couleur qui a de la personnalité. Le CoCo2 de Radio Shack. On solde pour Noël à partir de 149,95.
CoCo2 de Radio Shack, ton affaire est dans le sac.
Hey, Megabuck.
Nothing like a little bit of Megabug being enjoyed in Quebec. So we're here. We are with a very small and intimate panel. We've got a handful of people watching us live right now too. So with this, we've got Ron Delvaux, Steve Bjork, and Al Hartman, and we've got a bunch of people in the live chat watching us: Al Hartman, Ken Reighard, and Curtis Boyle, Grant Leighty, and Nick Marotta, Nick Marotta, and Ken, and Extructus. So hello to everybody in the live chat. So I figured one of the things we could talk about tonight, whatever time it is this new thing that is out now that the kids are talking about. All the kids are talking about this these days, but there is this thing calling itself the Atari VCS, which is supposedly going to be a new modern retro console. And so if you're a fan of Atari, like a lot of people are, this sounds intriguing. This sounds compelling. This sounds like this could be everything that we want and more. But I believe there's a lot of lukewarm or mixed reactions from the community. So why don't we just start off with how many of you guys are already somewhat familiar with this, and what are your thoughts on it so far?
Well, I've been following it, and a lot of the comments that have been made out there in the YouTube on videos and like that, some of them are very upset that a company like Atari is using a Kickstarter program to get people to pay for the building of this unit. Now, true, it's going to cost a lot more than the money they're raising to actually get this product out the door. So yeah, they're raising part of the funds and like that. Typically, you go to a VC or somebody else that you get the orders and go to a VC and get capital that way. But, they promise some stuff, but I get a little concerned when one of the big promises is the fact that it has a real wood grain thing placed on the front of it. Mm-hmm. We thought at first it was, this is imitation wood like the original VCS. No, this is real wood, and this is one of the things they're hyping. Okay. not the speed of the unit, and not the rest of the capabilities of the machine. Right. It is a Linux box.
Right. So they do have some general specs. They do mention that it's got a Radeon CPU and GPU, which means it's like a PC. They do mention it's basically running Ubuntu Linux, so it's kind of like an overpowered Raspberry Pi. And it is going to include the Atari Vault collection, which has got a bunch of retro titles, but you can get the Atari Vault on every single platform. It's available for every console. It's available for mobile devices. But it looks cool. I want to give them credit for this design. But does this machine exist? Is it vaporware? Are these just computer-generated renderings? Has anybody seen it in the wild? And more importantly, is it worth $300? And in my opinion, I don't think it is. I think that's my biggest complaint.
My question too is, what's the difference between the collector's edition and the standard edition, which is $100 less? Right.
So it's basically if you pre-purchase through Indiegogo, and I'll just play this little video clip right here. I believe you get the that's the only way you're going to get the wood grain model.
Atari on. More than 40 years ago, Atari opened a portal into our living rooms with the Atari 2600. Now, we're ready to reopen that portal and introduce a brand new Atari product, inspired by the past, but created, designed, and engineered for today. Introducing the Atari VCS.
Can you guys hear that okay?
This meteor from another planet.
Yes.
It crashed here and kicked off the evolution of all gaming life as we know it.
Not only was this sort of a video game console, but it was turning television media differently.
So here's what they're kind of showing you here is that it's kind of this hybrid thing where it's going to be a retro console. It will have like the Atari Vault built in, but it's also going to be a streaming device. So I guess apparently you can watch like Netflix on it, or maybe you can even stream from it, because it does look like they're showing you like doing like this is a screen of Twitch here on the side. So are you able to play your game and stream your game to Twitch while you're playing it? That might be kind of cool, but you can already do that on a modern video game console. They are going to have a handful of updated versions of their games. So like there was a Tempest 2000, which was a reimagining of the classic Tempest. I guess now this is Tempest 3000 or 4000. They've redesigned some of the controllers, which is kind of cool. There are certain aspects of it that I think are interesting. But for me, what I think is it's a very tough pill to swallow is the $300 price tag they want for this particular model. And this is the wood grain model. This is the pre-launch edition. If you don't get this one, you can get the Darth Vader edition, which is a little bit cheaper. I guess most of the general public will get the Darth Vader edition if you don't pre-purchase it.
Well, it does this $300 unit does include a joystick.
Okay.
which the $200 model does not. So that's a $30 option.
Yeah.
So you're paying $70 for the wood grain, and the fact that you can say you have the special launch. By the way, if you want to get the one with wood grain, I think you have to purchase it by June 11th.
So you're running low on time, huh?
Yeah. If you want the standard version, you've got until the end of the Kickstarter.
Gotcha.
Now, they say that in the store, when they finally come out with the version beyond this program, you're looking at not $199 for the basic version, but $299.
Yeah. And to me, that's a really rough pill to swallow. When you look at the fact I can buy an introductory Xbox One right now, like the Xbox One S, the Slim Edition, retailing on that right now is about $200 to $250, and that is basically a mid-grade gaming PC. You know, it's got an 8-core processor, it's got RAM, it's got a GPU, it plays, you know, some fairly high-end games. I don't think this thing is going to be as high-end as an Xbox. And maybe the argument can be kind of like when the Wii came out, the original Nintendo Wii. It didn't have the same horsepower of like the Xbox 360 or the PlayStation 2 or 3 or whatever the contemporary was at the time. But they did come up with a whole new concept of this casual gaming. You know, so the Wii didn't necessarily need to have the latest, greatest chips. It just created a fun platform. So could this be the Wii, the retro Wii gateway drug, you know?
And that's the thing, is whether or not, you know, if you keep it on the retro, and that's, you know, you're going to get all these retro games on it. And the other question I've got, which they don't talk about, is what their plans are for the software. What price ranges are we looking at?
Yeah.
Because all content's going to be downloaded.
Right, completely digital distribution. There you can plug things in via USB, but I don't think there's going to be over-the-counter software you can get for it via USB.
No.
So you'll probably have to get it through their marketplace, which means they're going to control that. It's a good question.
Undoubtedly, they'll be selling like gift cards for their store, the Atari store.
Yes.
You'll go into a store, you'll buy a card, then you'll go online, buy your game, redeem your card. So that's how retail stores will get in on selling stuff to go along with it, the software.
Yeah, but it does not work out that well. Steam tries to do that, and you go into a Fry's, they say virtually the only time they ever sell a Steam gift card is when they have a little discount on them. And they don't make that much money when they got that discount.
See, what they would be smart to do is sell packages in the store that is a manual for the game in a box, a game box that looks like any other game box, and then there's a card with a code in the box. You get home, you go on your VCS, you type in the code, boom, the game is on your system. That would be the only way to get impulse buyers to go in and buy titles specifically, rather than a gift card and come up against what Steve just mentioned.
Yeah. The other thing too is, ever since the original Star Wars movie came out, and they came out with the toys for that movie, they weren't ready for Christmas. So what you bought was a box and a certificate you sent in, and they mailed you the toy a couple months later.
I remember that.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, there's a lot of people that got very negative ideas about that. And while they don't think about that specifically, it's the fact that if I'm going into the store to buy this, I want it now. Now, true, they can get it now. They can download it. But what it is Atari is losing money to the store to sell it. And unless they sell these things in the stores, which is going to be a pretty hard sell after the, what was that console again? The UMA? There was a game console that came out a few years ago, and it was basically a small processor in there, and it just terrible. I mean, I got the thing, I brought it home, didn't care for it, brought it back, He says, yeah, we're getting a lot of returns here. I doubt we'll keep any of them out of the store. They're all coming back.
Well, I'm looking at the Indiegogo page, and there is an SD card slot on the back.
Yeah.
So you could plug in.
Yeah, the SD card pack, from what I was hearing, is for expansion.
Right. So you could buy a game. It could come on an 8 gig SD card.
Yeah.
You could plug it in.
As I said, it's the two-factor of, do they want to lose money to the stores to have the stores help sell more of the product? And the only way that's going to happen is if they can get this machine in the store, because the store's not going to carry these little carts unless they're selling the system.
Right. Well, we'll see what happens.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to get a lot of original Atari 2600 games. You're going to be able to hook them up to a modern TV via an HDMI connection, which I love.
Right.
And
well, they'd be smart to add 5200 games, maybe even Atari ST games under an emulator for the higher res games that are available.
Yep.
They expand the catalog right away.
Well, you've seen the demos for things like their Tempest.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's basically what they've done on higher powered systems. Now, the thing is, me as a developer, I really want to find out just how powerful the chip is in there. You know, AMD, they make a lot of chips.
Yeah.
Some of them are winners, and some of them, well, I don't want to call them lemons, but they roll as well as a square wheel.
And we've been joined by Grant Leighty. Welcome to the call, Grant.
Hi, Grant.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
And Jim Gary tried to call in, but I couldn't add Jim to the call. So I don't know, some weird stuff going on, but Skype is very particular. And I don't know if this is the same account you've called us on before, Jim, but in order to join a group call, you need to have this account as a Skype contact. So you need to send a contact request to CoCoTALK at CoCoTALK.live. Once we have you as a contact, I should be able to add you to the group call. But you've also got to be on the latest version of Skype, too, because Skype doesn't like talking to older versions of Skype. So, Al, what are your thoughts on this console? Do you think it's going to hold water, and do you think there's going to be a good market for it?
No, I actually don't. I think it's all hype, and it's not really... The other systems, the PlayStation and the Xbox, have the name. And this can't do anything they aren't already doing.
Right.
And the only thing is, this will sell to people like me who had an Atari VCS back in the day.
Right.
And think it's cool. I mean, I'm not going to buy one, but I'm just saying it's going to sell to the older people. The newer kids are not going to really be impressed by all the old games because there's no nostalgia for them.
Right.
But if they want to play them, they can get them on the new systems anyway.
Right.
Like I said.
So who's the target audience, though? A person who basically either owned or remembered the original Atari and now has some dispensable income and says, yeah, I'm going to drop some coin on this just to have it, just because?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Well, see, part of the problem, too, is that you have a company that's got this incredible library, and they're looking at a way to bring it out. And, of course, they'd bring out their little emulator small systems and like that, and they'd sell, but they didn't sell great. They're hoping that this could be an ongoing revenue generator, making lots of money, not just selling the systems, because it looks like that's what they're doing, is they're pricing them high enough that they can make a profit. After all, they only got 4 gigs of RAM in there.
Mm-hmm.
I got a question. So, are you going to be able to use Ubuntu on it, and surf the web and do stuff in Ubuntu?
I don't think it's going to be an open Linux distro that you can use like you could on any other operating system. It's probably going to be a closed user interface.
Because on the CoCo Pi, I can switch it to, I can.
Right. Yeah, CoCo Pi is a specialty project, though.
That's a Pi, and a Pi has these options.
Well, this isn't really a Pi. This is a Linux-based system, but it's being sold as a game console. So it's going to have a closed user interface. Just like an Xbox One technically runs Windows 10, but I'll never get to a desktop or a command prompt. I am controlled by the bootable user interface that comes with it. So the fact it's running Linux, I don't think, like on a Raspberry Pi, you're going to be able to get to that desktop. That would be the problem. Is now you've given to like a Linux admin guru, that would be great, but to a consumer, that's a nightmare, because now they're going to start screwing things up, and it becomes a support nightmare of the system. So my money would be no. There's not going to be root level access and desktop user interface access to the hardware.
Not out of the box.
No, well, see, that's the thing, is they really have to lock the system down to get developers, because the developers want to make sure they get paid, not put it on a system where everything's going to be pirated.
Yeah.
One other thing, how do they keep this thing cool?
No.
Its design is vented. But here's the concern I've got, is speaking along those lines. It says its power is from 35 to 45 watts. And they're trying to run the CPU at, where was I? Just was 3.3 gigahertz. That's an awful lot of power for that particular CPU at that speed. In other words, I think that's the maximum it can run one core. But if it's running multiple cores, they're going to slow down to a half to a third that speed at the best.
Yeah, well, here's a similar product that's come out recently, like the NES Classic and the Super Nintendo Mini Classic editions. Here my other question is this: who the hell is Atari right now? Who is calling themselves Atari? Who are the actual people making this? Because Nolan Bushnell is not in the picture. The original people who had the Atari hardware name and stuff, I don't think any of those original owners are around. So I think there's just been a bunch of IP that's changed hands many times over the years.
Oh, definitely.
The Tramiels are out of it. Warner Brothers is out of it. I think it's a bunch of venture capitalists that own the brand.
Since the video game crash, I think this has been sold around to at least 3 different companies.
Yeah, so whoever
I
could be mistaken, but I seem to recall that.
Yeah.
One of the games companies owned it for a while, because I remember buying some Atari games, and they were Atari branded, but they were by like a big name game company.
Yeah, I remember some Atari games that were released by Infogrames for a while, and Warner Brothers Distribution was involved for a while. And I just want to say this: listen, I don't wish this product ill will. I would like this product to be successful, but I do have some skepticism and some reservations just based on how they're trying to promote it and how they're just doing this fundraising. Like, can you imagine if Nintendo says, hey, we're going to release a new console, but we need everybody to, join our Kickstarter to help us fund this, I mean, but luckily for Nintendo, they've been around. They haven't really, the company has been intact from the, from its old days to today, where Atari has changed hands and changed ownership. To me, it seems a little sketchy that we need you guys to fund us to even produce the product. And I get it, it's not cheap to make these things, but if this is a real company, why can't they just make it and sell it,
Well, yeah, part of doing the Indiegogo is to judge the demand for the game.
Yeah, yeah.
They're going to do an initial run, and they're going to base that on how many people do the Indiegogo plus, whatever percentage to have an overrun. But they're really trying to judge the demand for the product.
Mm-hmm.
Like that other thing, the Spectrum Next.
Yeah.
Guys are coming out with a new updated, beautiful looking machine, an updated Spectrum computer, and they're doing it on, I don't remember if it's Indiegogo or one of the other fundraising sites, but they're raising money to build a new Spectrum computer.
This is the Atari website here that I have.
Okay.
It doesn't show that game machine anywhere.
Huh.
Well, no, yeah, well, that's, you have to go to the VCS.com or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah,
AtariVCS.com.
Why wouldn't it be on this page?
On Atari.com?
Yeah.
Not the same company.
Yeah.
Oh.
So whoever's selling Atari software is one company, and whoever's selling this Atari console is another company. All right.
Or a separate division.
Yeah. Yeah. A little confusing.
Yeah.
So
I mean, well, but sitting at the goal, I will say this: they've got over 10,000 backers.
Yeah.
You know, they've raised $3.7 million, and they can do a production run and make money. They've got enough units that it'll work. But you know, like when good old Microsoft builds their Xbox, they talk to a company and say, "Hey, can you build us 2 million?" It's not like,
right,
oh,
right.
we want 10,000. It's quite a bit larger logistics going on.
Yeah, the volume.
Well, I think you've got to downsize expectations of success with a product like this and not compare it to an Xbox or a PlayStation, because it's simply not going to sell in those numbers. But I don't know what number you might come up with to say that this product is a success, but don't expect it to sell like an Xbox or a Nintendo or what's...
Right. Well, they're going to theoretically sell at least 10,000 based on, this initial funding.
It's like UMA when that came out. There was a lot of big companies got behind it, and they lost their shirts on that in those divisions producing product for it, and they're going to be leery. So I don't know. I see small developers maybe getting involved because but the moment that a large developer comes in, those small developers, they're not going to have a market to sell to. So, and like that. Now, the way a company introducing a new game system works is they'll give deals, breaks, they'll even pay somebody to develop product for them. And maybe that's something that Atari needs to do, is to go out there and wine and dine some of the indie developers to get them to put their quality games on it.
Well, I don't know. I'm looking at the little ad on the Indiegogo, and it's got my favorite game on it, Star Raiders. Although not the 2600 version. I like the Atari 800 or the ST version.
Yeah.
But that's one of the main reasons I have an 800 XL, is just to play Star Raiders.
Well, I'm also looking through the stuff too, and they actually have arcade translations, which would be really good.
Right.
And that could end up a reason why I buy it, is just for those arcade translations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we go back to the idea of that NES Classic, the Mini Classic, and the Super Nintendo Mini Classic, so part of the challenge, and Nintendo luckily has all of the first-party title. They own the intellectual property, all Nintendo first-party titles, whereas whoever Atari is, there's different owners of different IP for Atari games. Some of the 2600 line versus arcade line and stuff. So all that IP is not under one umbrella, where at least with Nintendo it is. But the original NES Classic, I think there was like 30 games built in. Some of them were third party, so they had to license things like Castlevania from Konami and things. But it was a closed system, right? Where listen, it's baked in. The software you got for this is baked in. You got 30 games. That's it. As we all know, it's been hacked. So people have hacked that system and were able to add more games to it. I think the Super NES Classic was probably also hacked. But what if Nintendo took that system and took that same hardware and said, look, we're going to open up a store, and we're going to let you download some more titles. We'll give you the 30 games, and a big difference in price, too. It's like $60 to $80 for that unit. But again, they're able to produce a much higher volume, right? So all of you guys who are working on your little hardware projects, you already know when it comes to get a circuit board designed, if you get one designed, there's a certain price. If you do a run of 100, there's a better price. And when you get into the tens of thousands of millions, that price, that scale slides dramatically, right? So Nintendo's got the finances to produce millions of units, so they can sell it for $60.
Well, I'll tell you something about that NES Classic. My brother bought one, and his son, my nephew, is like 8 years old, loves the games on it. The games are not outdated. Kids today enjoy those games as much as we did when we were kids.
Now, in the case of the NES Classic, the third-party games were very easy for them to get because Nintendo had a stupid little rule for that system. If you put out a game for their console, you couldn't sell it for another console. It changed with the Super NES because they were trying to get some of the big guys, but they would lock everybody up. So Castlevania was only available at the time for their system, which gave Sega a lot of issues.
Yeah.
I've been watching a lot on YouTube. This guy, Murray, David Murray, the 8-bit guy.
Yep.
He did a video where he compared the NES Classic to a couple of the clone machines. Because there are NES Classic clones that you can buy on eBay.
Sure.
Some of them as low as $30. And that was a very interesting video to see how close they were able to get their machines to emulating the real NES. And some of them even take multiple cartridge formats.
Wow.
That's the thing is these emulators, like the audio doesn't work as well sometimes. The video doesn't come up as clear. Gee, what was purple is now pink. On some of these, third-party units, knockoffs. Things that are produced actually by the company do a lot better.
Yeah, but when you couldn't get an NES Classic because they were sold out like crazy last Christmas, and you had to get something for your kid, a $30 game that you knew you were going to throw away once you could get the real thing wasn't so bad.
Right.
Yeah.
Had some shortcomings.
And you know why they sold out. They purposely didn't want any of these units sitting around in a bargain bin. More importantly, they didn't want stores not to sell out because they had all those issues back in the day. I mean, stores have a long memory about the video game crash.
Jim Gary keeps trying to call in, and I'm not able to add him to the call. So I don't know why, Jim. Make sure that you've added us as a contact, and make sure you've got the latest version of Skype client for Windows or Mac or whatever you're running there.
Jim Gary has to be the hardest working programmer these days in the field.
Hands
He's
down.
constantly translating things to MC10. It's just amazing how much work he puts in.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Must be on a daily basis.
Well, right now, me looking at this Atari VCS, 10,000 users actually is not enough for me to develop a game for. A brand new game.
I mean, we're not going to have megabugs for the Atari VCS?
No. Now, if they can make it 50,000, then I might consider it. And I'm just saying this as a developer, and that's the way a lot of developers are going to look at it. So it's going to be really up to them to, as I said earlier, get their own library out and wine and dine some folks.
Yep. Software is what sells the hardware, and the number of installed units it's kind of the chicken and the egg. It's a vicious cycle where nobody wants to develop for a minority system. If there's not a lot of units out there, nobody wants to develop for it. And by the same token, if there's not a lot of software, nobody's going to buy the system. So it's just really finding that synergy.
That would include Tandy, huh?
Yeah. If Atari really believes in the system, they should do what book publishers do and get a software publisher and guarantee them an advance. Like, okay, we'll guarantee you the licensing fee or the profit from 50,000 games, and as we sell the games, we'll credit that towards what we've paid you in advance. And if we don't sell 50,000 games, well, that's our loss, but you'll get your guaranteed profit.
That's exactly how Tandy did it with me. When I came in with the title, they paid me up front against royalties.
Wow. Man, I wonder how that works. I wonder how the market is today with that. And Jason, the CoCo Man, is calling in right now, and I'm able to add Jason. So we're not excluding you on purpose, Jim Gary. I just don't know why we're not able to make that connection. So Grant Leighty, you've been a little quiet there. What's going on with you?
Not much. Just kind of enjoying the week and everything, and after recovering, and so that's about it.
Okay. And since some of the people watching might not be familiar with who you are through our daytime CoCoTALK show, you want to do a quick bio and just talk about who you are, what you did in the past, and what you're doing now in the retro hobby?
Yeah, my name is Grant Leighty. I'm from Kansas City, and basically I started with the CoCo 2 16K standard color basic in 1986. That's where I got into computers for the very first time. Then I upgraded to the CoCo 2 64K. Of course, as you know, the standard color computer, you can't do much with that one. So I, try to get my parents to hurry up and get me the 64K extended color basic. Then after that, I upgraded to the CoCo 3 and used that clear into the early 90s before I jumped up to the Tandy 1000s. Pretty much, I was one of those people who would type all those programs in from the Rainbow, and then, of course, you get done typing it in, and then you find out there's a typo and everything, so you have to wait till the following month. But that was pretty much what I did with the CoCo back in the day. It was a lot of fun, got me starting computers, and, now I'm in the computer business myself, working for the Federal Reserve Bank. So, but a lot of good times, a lot of good memories.
Excellent, excellent. And now you are you're back in the retro hobby. How long have you been in the retro hobby and part of the retro communities and stuff like that now?
Well, about 2 years I started back into it. I went to the CoCo Fest about 12 years ago for the first time, and then, kind of like Curtis, I took a hiatus and then got back into it when I found your channel, of course, and the CoCo Crew podcast, and got back into it, and I've been into it now for 2 years now.
Yeah, cool. Well, we're glad to have you, and we're glad to have you on our daytime show, CoCoTALK, and thanks for being here tonight for our After Dark Retro Talk. We'll get to you in just a second, Jason, but so when Jason joined in, your brother Ken goes, "There goes the show." Nick Marotta was asking, did the original CoCo Basic have the edit line command? And that answer is no, right? In standard color Basic, if you made a mistake, you had to retype the entire line, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, good times there. Right?
I even came out with a screen editor so you didn't have to retype it for color basic.
And also now joining us on the program, as seen at PenFest 99, as seen at PenFest 2000, as seen at CoCoFest 2018, maker of the Switcheroo, the fastest selling hardware product for the Tandy Color Computer 3. It is Jason, the CoCo Man Reighard. Welcome to Retro Talk After Dark, Jason. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing just great. Thought I'd pop by and
check it out.
Check it out. I was listening on the stream and I heard the VCS talk and everything like that, but and the Switcheroo, my most successful retro hardware product that I've had available for sale.
And last weekend you were at CorgsCon. You were our correspondent, which was the Columbus, Ohio Retro Gaming Society, and you ended up bringing back a lot of Atari 2600 paraphernalia. Do you recall what some of your haul was that you brought back from that event?
Yeah, CorgsCon, of course. Corgs is the Columbus, Ohio Retro Gaming Society. And I tried to look for some unique titles. I have quite a bit of a 2600 and 5200 and 7800 collection for the Atari. And what did I pick up? I picked up, well, the one I picked up, I just picked up because of the title. It was a game called Coconuts. I'd never even heard of it. And basically, you're this fella, and you have to, there's this monkey in these palm trees, and you have to dodge the falling coconuts, and it's just like any of the games of that era. It just gets faster. I've never heard of that one, but that was like $5. I said, for $5, it has the name CoCo in it. I gotta get it.
There you go.
I also, from the same fellow, I picked up a game, The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle, for the Atari 2600. It appears to be. I didn't open it up, but it appears to be actually an unreleased game. He said that M Network had written the game, and then it never got released because of rights. I guess they were having problems with J. Ward Productions, who at the time owned the rights to Rocky and Bullwinkle. Something happened. At least that's what he told me. I haven't had time to research it, but that was what he told me. So it was just a build-up cartridge. He had made some kind of label for it, and I played it. It seems to be okay, but I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing. I have to see if I can find some instructions for it, but that was one of the things. I just what the heck, I'll take a risk, and so far I'm not too sure about that one yet. But let's see. I picked up Snoopy and the Red Baron for the 2600. That's a fun game. I actually picked it up with the manual. Mm-hmm. That is actually a pretty fun game. That's of all the ones that I've brought back from CorgsCon, as little time as I've had to play with them, and it plays fine on my 7800. That one seems to be the most fun, though. It's just what it sounds. It's Snoopy flying on top of his doghouse. You're trying to shoot another plane down, and occasionally there's little bonus items you can pick up. Like I think some of them look like hot dogs and hamburgers and dog biscuits or something to that effect. It's without reading the manual, I got the manual. I haven't read the manual yet, but without reading the manual, with some of these Atari games, you never know exactly what it is until you read the book. And another title I picked up, which is one I've heard of. It looks very unique. I didn't get a book with it. It was a little pricey. I think it was about $20 for just a loose cart, but it was one that Activision put out. I believe it's called Private Eye. And the documentation is available and it's actually a timed game, and I think you have to go, and it's literally the streets of this city, and you have to go and find certain clues, and you only get a few minutes to do it, and it's a really strange game. If you ever get a chance to look that one up, I didn't spend a lot of time with it yet, but that one's going to take some effort to figure out.
But did you get the holy grail of Atari 2600 games, Custer's Revenge?
I actually own Custer's Revenge.
Oh, wow.
I probably had that title for 20 years. I bought that at a ham fest, which a ham fest is a gathering of amateur ham radio operators, probably about 20 years ago. I actually amassed a lot of my Atari and retro game collection 20 years ago or so, when it was super cheap.
In the good old days.
Oh, back in the good old days.
After the crash.
Oh, yeah. And it was the point where these items were not collectible. People just wanted to get rid of them. So I could pick up an Atari 2600 system, a boatload of games, for like 20. The most I ever paid for a whole system with a bunch of games back then was like $20. It was super, super cheap. When I went to CorgsCon, I'm like, the $5 for, even just a cartridge. There was a couple other games I wanted, but I looked at, I went, I don't know if I want to pay that much. But Snoopy and the Red Baron was one I'd wanted for a while, so I splurged. But yeah, Custer's Revenge, it's infamous.
By the way, Custer's Revenge wasn't the game that killed the system, and by far was not the worst. The worst ones were released by the X-rated movie industry. Trust me, I cannot talk about them.
I always thought it was the ET game.
They were the ones that put people in riots about the fact that this was degrading to women and stuff like that, and how dare they? And Congress was looking at censoring video games at that point. Yeah, that was the real beginning of the end.
Wow.
ETA may have kind of killed it for the stores because they got stuck with so much inventory, and then Atari only would give them credit in sending it back. They wouldn't give them money. But it was the X-ray video game industry that really put it over the edge.
And you'd think with all the visual fidelity of a 2600 that those would have been just as good as watching a tape.
I can't speak about the other games, but on top of it, Custer's Revenge, you know, aside, wasn't a very good game to begin with, let alone the what the plot was of it, which was,
yeah, it's the novelty of it was about it. Yeah. But yeah, there were worse ones where you were just shooting objects at women and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, there's just hey, James Diffendaffer has joined us, and in James' honor, let's go ahead and play a train whistle real quick. we had those. James
Diffendaffer now with 30% more train.
Ken says it was degrading to vaguely shaped pixels. Hey, Jason, Al Hartman's asking what a switcheroo is. So would you like to fill him in on what that is so I don't screw it up?
Absolutely. A switcheroo is for the Radio Shack or Tandy color computer 3, or as we refer to as the CoCo 3 here a lot. It is a cable to connect your CoCo 3 to it's part of a system to hook it to a modern display. What this cable does is take the RGB and composite signals from your color computer 3 and puts them out onto a SCART connector, which is a connector that was big in Europe for a lot of analog video signals. And what you do in connection with the switcheroo is you take your switcheroo cable, hook it to your CoCo 3, and then you hook it to another one of these mass-produced available SCART to HDMI converters, and then you're able to hook your color computer 3 up to a modern display. Where the one difference with this is it has a little toggle switch in it, and that has to come with that. Basically, will let you switch this switcher converter from either converting the more crisp RGB signal, or in some cases, a composite signal is desirable, and you can flip that toggle switch, and it will instruct the converter to look at the composite line instead. And with the color computer, there was a particular graphics screen that was only supposed to be 2 colors, but if you drew lines in particular patterns, you could get 2 more colors, a red and a blue. Now this only applied to it was applied to NTSC systems in North America, and it was just a defect in the NTSC television system. But that's what the cable is, the cable from the CoCo to the converter box, with the option of just being able to flip that switch back and forth quickly if you want to play some of the older games. For the 2 original models of the color computer were very heavy in that that artifact color screen. And unfortunately, when you look at an artifact color screen on an RGB monitor, you just see black and white. You'll actually see the vertical line patterns that a NTSC television would actually turn into red and blue.
Wow, that sounds pretty nice. I like that.
Mm-hmm. And you can thank me for the artifacting mode there, because I'm the one that taught Tandy all about it, and they went ahead and said, okay, we'll support it, not thinking it would work in Europe.
Well, no, that's right. You sure did. I remember. I was supposed to be getting one of those boxes from that guy on the CoCo list who was building the CoCo 3 to monitor boxes. I never did get around to getting that handled.
The SCART cable is so much better, and I do recommend buying the switcheroo because it is so easy just to flip that switch between the composite mode and the RGB mode.
Yeah, it sounds like it, because the other box just does the straight RGB.
Yeah. And the thing too is, I could have made my own cable, but I decided to buy his, not just to support him, but the fact is sometimes I'm lazy.
Now, can I explode this CoCoTALK by mentioning one word?
Sure.
CoCo 4.
CoCo 4.
Oh, great.
Oh, can we do the movie trailer one? All right, awesome.
In a world where RGB produces black and white video,
there's my game.
One cable can make a difference. Switcheroo. CoCo3ScartCable.com.
That was one of my favorite games back in the day.
Yep, yep.
Did you ever play? Did you ever play Z89?
I downloaded it.
Yeah.
I haven't played it yet. My CoCo 3 is not set up.
You downloaded it as not buy it?
You downloaded it from the official Steve Bjork repository.
No, I may have just.
Well, wherever you found it, don't tell us. We don't want to know.
If you seriously, if you tell me where you found it, I have to go and tell them cease and desist and take it off their system. So don't tell me.
No, I may be wrong in that I downloaded it, but I remember hearing about it. Oh no, I'm not gonna. I won't lie to you. I won't lie to you. Look.
What's a download?
A friend of mine had it.
See, that's part of the rule is if I find out somebody's pirating my software, I have to do a cease and desist, get them to stop so I can protect all my copyrights. Because years ago, somebody used the fact that I didn't stop somebody from pirating my software against me and said it was okay to use this other software that I was currently selling and making my livelihood on. So I have spent a lot of money in court to defend my right to my copyrights.
No, I don't. I don't have a copy of it. I must have just read about it.
Okay, good.
Yeah, but
my memory is not 100% these days.
Yeah.
Z89 is a CoCo 3 version of Zaxxon using the 16 color mode, so it definitely looks a lot more like the arcade edition. The CoCo 2 version was very groundbreaking for the time and for the hardware capabilities of that machine. You know, there was a couple of these like benchmark products that were like system sellers. So like on the ColecoVision, the fact that the ColecoVision had a fairly good Donkey Kong game and had a halfway decent Zaxxon, you know, everybody was kind of drooling and excited about that. But we were able to get some pretty cool titles on the CoCo, like Donkey King for the CoCo 2 is probably, you know, there's no doubt an extremely impressive 8-bit clone of Donkey Kong, and it's not even sanctioned. You know, it's just a total clone, but it's like a genetic, you know, equivalent of the real thing. And then of course Zaxxon, Steve Bjork's officially licensed Zaxxon too, is just a really smooth arcade quality game experience that you would expect on systems that have dedicated hardware, you know, for scrolling and sound generation and stuff. So
but I will say this though, my arcade version of Zaxxon is much better.
Yeah, and Steve, you were also involved in the arcade version of. Did you make it from scratch, or did you just help them bring it to the finish line?
The game was testing poorly in America, so I helped them get it so that it tested better in the arcades, and because of that, we got the rights to it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So when we say Steve's the guy who brought us Zaxxon, it's very literal on many levels. And hey, we've just been joined by and from all the way down from Miami, Javier is with us. How are you, Javier?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good, good. We've been talking about the Atari VCS for a little while, the new Atari console. I think we beat that one to death. But Javier is an Apple guy, so maybe we can get into some Apple discussions here in a moment. But it's probably a good time to take another commercial break and a bio break in case anybody needs to potty, tinkle, do whatever you got to do. I'll run about a minute or so's worth of commercials. So Retro Talk After Dark will return shortly. Thank you all for being here. We'll be back in just a minute.
CoCoTALK After Dark. CoCoTALK After Dark.
Hello, this is Grant Leighty with CoCoTALK. Got your CoCo 3 yet?
We will return after these messages.
Hey everybody, this is Bill Noble co-author of Nitrous 9. You are listening to CoCoTALK Live, the leading live CoCoTALK show.
G'day, mates. This is Nick Marionettes, author of such color computer titles as Donut Disaster, Rupert Rhymes, and Rockstar Pilot. And I am here today to tell you about the world's most fabulous operating system, OS 9. OS 9 and its current incarnation, Nitrous 9, is the most advanced operating system ever created. And what makes it so good? Ease of use. I find OS 9 so incredibly intuitive that I haven't once cracked open the user manual. And yet I've been able to create such incredible games faster than the time it takes to sing Waltzing Matilda. Using OS 9, I expect my next game, Funstar, will be done this weekend and distributed exclusively on ROM cartridge. OS 9 forever.
Any resemblance to actual events to persons living or dead is purely coincidental.
All right, there's a little inside humor there for you. For those of you who watch our CoCoTALK show and you're familiar with the CoCo operating system known as OS 9, there's a lot of not so subtle humor there. So that's a nice running gag that's been going on in our program for quite some time. I think what I'd like to do real quick too, again, I'm pretty sure that most of the people watching us live right now on YouTube and Facebook are probably already familiar with the show. But just in case you're not familiar with our Saturday afternoon show called CoCoTALK, I'm going to play a little piece here that's been put together by our good friend Brian Joyce in Australia of Extructus Productions. So here's a little promo for our daytime version of CoCoTALK.
My shirt, too sexy for my shirt, so sexy it hurts. And I'm too sexy for Milan, too sexy for Milan, New York and Japan. And I'm too sexy for your
David Ladd. More inside humor there. So yeah. So CoCoTALK every weekend at CoCoTALK.live is where you can see our weekly live talk show featuring the Tandy color computer. And tonight we're doing RetroTALK, where we're talking about all things retro. And joining us now on the program, Javier Rivera. How are you, sir? From Miami. And I think you're muted.
Yes, I was.
All right, and I know there's a time zone difference. I'm 2 hours north of you. So what time is it in Miami tonight?
I don't know. It's not in America. It's different.
It's like one of those time zones, like that. There's only a half hour or 15 minutes difference.
Yeah,
You know, when I drive up to Fort Lauderdale, I gotta show my passport, don't you?
Yeah, I gotta go through TSA the whole 9 yards, right? Yeah. So welcome back. You were with us last week too on our Saturday afternoon show. Glad to have you back.
Thanks.
Since this is being live streamed on Facebook and people will be watching this probably later on who didn't catch it live, you want to do a little introduction and explain, like, what you did back in the day and kind of what you do now, what some of your favorite systems are, things like that?
Well, when I was a kid, that's an old time ago. When I was a kid, I had my first computer was actually a Pong, but then after that we got a TI-99 4A, and that was an amazing machine. I learned to program a little bit on that one, and then one day my dad, all my friends had Apple IIs. That's down in Mexico, back in Mexico. And I wanted an Apple II, so my brother and I was like, yeah, we want an Apple II, an Apple. He comes with an Apple IIc one day. And, bear in mind that we get magazines like 4 months behind over there. So we didn't knew that was an Apple II. So we were really pissed because we were like, no, we want an Apple II, not that little thing. And then doesn't even have a drive. And, when he showed us, no, it's an Apple II, and that's the latest, blah, blah, we were like, oh! All of a sudden, we were all the latest kids and everything, and it was fun.
Yeah.
So that was the good old Apple II, and always had Apple II. Then after that, I just moved to Macintosh, and I studied graphic design. So it was like pretty straightforward for me. So never used. I used almost all the Macintosh models I could. I never save anyone because I used to sell it. I sell my computer to buy the new version and so forth. So I never kept the old Macintosh, but I love them also.
Hey, let me ask you a question about it. You mentioned Mexico, which is, I'm not anywhere near as familiar with, South America, but in the United States, there was kind of almost a status symbol based on what system you had, and we had the rivalries back in the 80s. And honestly, an Apple II, when it first came out in like 1977, 1978, it was like $1,300 for the machine. And in 1977 or 1978, that was a lot of money. The Atari 800 was a $1,000 system in the 80s. It was a lot of money. So, and the color computer when it was new was about $400 for the base unit. It's, roughly half to a third of the price. So, in the States, unless your parents had money, and not only had money, but were willing to spend the money on this thing called a computer that not everybody had and was into, and it wasn't a clear, obvious choice to spend this kind of money. It was like, now it was bragging rights, because now you had all the kids in the schoolyard saying, well, I've got an Atari, and I'm better than you, and I've got an Apple, and hoo. So what was it like in Mexico with the different systems? Was there a pecking order and a hierarchy and a social class to what system you owned? Yeah.
Basically, when I get the Apple II, my friends were a little bit, they got a little money, so they got the Apple II. It was like the high end for the kids over there.
Yeah.
Everybody had either a PC clone or they had Commodores.
Okay.
And I had for a long time, I had a very big rivalry with Amigas, to be honest. I hate them. I'll tell you this in a little bit. But it was funny because, there was no software distribution down there. Of course, the Apple dealers were very, very few. And I'd never seen, when I was down there, an original program. So what we did is it was very normal for us to swap copy, pirated discs. Okay. Actually, there was this guy in the newspaper that he announced himself. I trade programs.
Wow.
And then very open. Because there was no software over there, licensed or any copyright. So we called him on the phone. He comes with his car. He opens his trunk.
That's like a drug dealer. It's software out of your trunk.
And he has boxes. And he said, what do you want? Apple, Commodore, Atari? I say,
what you need?
Takes the Apple box. Big box full of little boxes with floppies and takes it to your house. And then you show him what he got. He shows him what he got, and then you say, "Okay, I want to trade this for this, this for this." And after like half an hour of talking about trading, we just say, "Okay, let's do it." And we just align the things that we want to trade, align the things that he wants, and begin to copy, swap. It was funny, really funny.
Wow, that's something. That is something. So were Tandy products well known or even existing in Mexico? No,
because Radio Shack was not very big in Mexico, to be honest.
Okay.
So there was Atari and there was Commodore, and Apple was a little bit for the high end. Good thing is that my dad could actually he worked for a company for Sperry Univac. I don't know if you heard about it. So
Univac, it's a computer company.
Yeah, but big computers.
Yeah. That's like the main.
He sold them to the government and all that. So
yeah,
he actually smuggled one Apple IIc in his packet.
Smuggled. Oh wow.
Yeah, it wasn't allowed, and you got to pay a lot of taxes and all that. So he just put it on the back of his clothes, and they didn't sell it because it was so small.
Wow.
And they weren't expecting it, so we were just lucky.
So that was technically like your second system. I'm sorry, was somebody getting ready to talk to Javier?
I have an interesting Tandy Mexico fact.
Really?
Tandy in Mexico used to sell a Model 1 clone called the L&W80. They badged it as a Radio Shack computer. The owners of L&W went on to form AST Research, who made IBM clones. Tandy bought AST Research eventually. So it's like the whole thing came around in a circle.
Wow. David Lafanus just joined us too in the live stream. Hey, David, another one of our friends from our Florida Retro Club. So that's cool. So your first computer was the TI, you mentioned, besides the Pong machine. And then you got into an Apple II, and you've been an Apple guy ever since, and you've been very loyal to Apple. And so now you use modern Macs, right? And you had Apple IIs. Yeah, maybe we can talk a little bit about the rivalries that used to exist with systems, you know, back in the day. It was very much like college teams,
it is,
you know, things like that, and part of it was very much bragging rights, and there was, you know, it was a status symbol because the Apple was very, and you're kind of an exception because you're a nice Apple guy, right? But
everybody's nice.
But for me, and that's the nice thing now about everybody in the retro hobby, we're older, hopefully wiser, maybe a little bit more mellow, maybe a little bit more mature. But when you were kids, this is my problem. I have these deep emotional scars, these deep wounds of having my snobby Apple friends. Like, I am so much better than you because I have an Apple. You know, me and Muffy and Bissy,
sorry.
and, you know, we're at the country club on our Apples, you know, and we're so much better than you, you know. And so ever since I was a kid, 12 years old, I had these douchebags who just thought they were better than everybody because they owned an Apple, you know. So I kind of grew up with that stigma of not liking Apple people. You know?
Yes, but let's not forget that Microsoft had a Bell Apple out at one point.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, and so, and the people who had the Atari they were proud and loyal to their system, and Commodore, you know, and we can look back now when you understand the hardware from a technical perspective. A lot of those machines like Atari and Commodore and even TI, technologically, they had some good hardware in there with music chips and graphics chips and sprites and scrolling. So there were things in those machines that would allow them to be much better game systems.
Right.
But were they better computers? You know, that's more of opinion. What I looked at in the day, because I was a kid, I did not program in assembly. I still don't program in assembly. So to me, what told me was a good computer was how good was the basic. That doesn't matter what chips are inside the computer. What can I myself do with this machine? And I can definitely say hands down that the extended color basic on the color computer is one of the most versatile and powerful forms of BASIC with all the commands, and that version of BASIC would become the template for Microsoft BASIC to this very day. So that was one of the last times they made an 8-bit BASIC, and those commands with circle, paint, draw, you know, get, put, all those things made their way into GW BASIC, into BASIC A, and then Quick BASIC, and eventually Visual BASIC. So the CoCo BASIC, when I learned that, I was able to transition to MS-DOS BASIC and Visual BASIC and a lot of other things because there was no learning curve. So despite what it didn't have in hardware, I liked my machine because I was very capable to produce, you know, games and software on it that I don't know if I had an Apple, I don't know if I would have been as interested, because I don't think I would have been able to produce the level of gaming and animations and all the things I did with the CoCo. I don't know if Apple Basic allowed you to draw circles and paint in circles and move objects across the screen easily and stuff like that, you know. So
I don't think Apple even had what do you call sprites. They don't have sprites.
No, they didn't either. No, Apple and the CoCo have a lot of things in common in that respect, that the CPU had to drive everything, right? Had artifact colors. CPU had to move everything on the screen. Actually, the Apple only had 1-bit audio, where we had 6-bit audio. But yeah, so I think that's kind of interesting. That's probably a good topic to talk about too, is like the fanboys and the rivalries.
Oh,
like,
I was a big time fanboy.
Yeah.
I was.
I've programmed in BASIC on the Apple II commercially, and I can tell you that it does have the ability to set and reset graphics on the screen, but it has no sprites or anything.
Right,
All you're doing is poking and peeking at memory addresses.
Yeah.
Right.
And there are some graphics commands, but they're very primitive. There was a company called Beagle Brothers that sold a third-party add-on to BASIC that added graphics commands and whatnot. They were very big on the Apple II. Yeah, Beagle Brothers. Yeah, they were great.
They were amazing.
And is that a new one, or is that one of your reproductions?
No, this is an original. Actually, before doing the reproductions, I got a full collection. This is the whole Beagle Brothers collection. It's here.
Yeah.
And I got in the back everything.
They had everything. They had a basic line editor like Steve's. They had compiled BASIC. They had all sorts of utilities. They were a great company, and they were funny as heck. Their ads and their newsletters were the funniest things you could ever see.
Right, right, and also, yeah, they were very funny. All their ads were very funny, and they teach you everything really easy. You know, they got these manuals and they got these charts, picks and pokes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in some of these guys, and they came with a bunch of stuff. I got a bunch of them around. But anyway, they're very educational. Very.
Yeah. Well, what I like about being in the hobby now is that we get to learn about systems that maybe we didn't have back in the day. Like there was no way I was going to be able to have anything more than one computer. There's no way I was going to have a color computer and a Commodore and an Atari and an Apple. Just financially, that was not a possibility. Now, again, because we're older, wiser, have a little bit more money, you know, we're no longer, I was working at Publix at the time, making $3.35 an hour part-time. And that's how I saved up and got my CoCo on layaway, you know, back in Miami, back in the day. So I have a computer because I funded it myself. That was my GoFundMe. It was go to work and save money and buy a computer, you know.
That's how I bought my Model 1. I took out a standing loan.
So most kids anyways, and maybe even some parents probably couldn't afford to have multiple systems. I mean, now I'm very lucky. I have color computers. I've got a TI in the box. I haven't opened it yet. I've got a Dragon in the box. I now have a couple of Atari 8-bits. I've got an Atari ST. I've got an MSX system. So, and I just got an Apple II to Apple IIc at CoCo Fest. So it's kind of cool now that we can get these systems, and it's nice when we come to like our Florida Retro Club meetings and everybody kind of talks about their knowledge, and there's a lot of knowledge sharing. I don't know if we were that open source with our knowledge and our enthusiasm. It was very much pillars and silos of Apple and you're Atari, and but now everybody's sharing we're sharing the love of the hobby because we're all old farts now playing with old machines. But people are also sharing, listen, this is how I do hardware. This is how I made a memory upgrade. And this is some software tricks. Here's some soldering techniques. Here's retro brighting that you can use. So there's a lot more like open source knowledge sharing now. So I think it's a great time to get into these nostalgic systems, you know?
Yeah. Definitely agree. You know, one of the things that I can tell you about why I hate Amigas, you know, I'm ashamed.
That could be a whole segment.
For years, I was I heard Amiga and I despised them, just like you say. I was like, that's crap system, you know, nobody likes that thing, blah, blah, blah. And that's just because, you know, when I was at school, at design school, of course, we were learning at, you know, doing things by hand. And the computers, they were the beginning of the computers. So I was lucky enough that my dad was actually living in the U.S. at that time, and he sent me a Macintosh SE. And I began to work with it, you know, play with it, and start working actually in doing desktop publishing. That was the beginning of desktop publishing.
Yeah.
You know? And designers, you know, only the big agencies could afford the computers. And all of a sudden I had one, and then on my university, they begin to buy computers for design, and because of the price, they couldn't afford Macintosh. So they decided to buy Amigas. And I was like, what are you talking about? You don't use Amigas for desktop publishing. Amigas are not good for design, blah, blah, blah. And they bought them, and they begin to praise them. Oh, these are better than Macintosh for desktop publishing, blah, blah, blah. And then we have a big rivalry over there, and we begin to have, you know, me and my Macintosh friends, we went to my university and talked to them and saying, no, Amigas are not good for this, blah, blah. And we actually did a showdown. Once
goodness.
The teachers say, no, you got to show us. If you know, put your money where your mouth is, and, you know, let's do a showdown. So we actually did a thing with an Amiga 500 and my Macintosh, and next to each other with some people around. And we say, well, the challenge is to create this letterhead, or, you know, like a little create a desktop publishing thing, you know, like a magazine. online and print it. The only thing we didn't have both was a laser printer. You know, you can carry that thing.
Sure.
But we at least have to show it on the screen.
Sure.
So we did the showdown, and at the end, honestly, the Mac won because it had very, very good programs.
Right.
And the Amiga, the pixels were like those the elongated pixels instead of being square pixels. So whatever you got in your screen, you couldn't really see. It was not what you see, it's what you get.
Yeah. Ken Reighard, Jason's brother, says this sounds a lot like West Side Story. So when you guys come in there, were you doing this?
Yeah, exactly.
We got a Mac. Yeah.
we tie our wrist and then we begin to do the mouse.
Yeah, we're gonna have a breakathon here. This is like a Footloose here, and it's gonna be a dance off. And
that was pretty stupid. Now in hindsight, but, you know, that time it was like. Whoa.
But well,
I know the guy from Microcode Solutions, Jim Drew, who made the Macintosh emulators for the Amiga, so that you could put a board in the Amiga and put a pair of Mac ROMs in it and run Mac software on the Amiga.
Yeah,
and I have the Atari ST with the Magic Sack and the Spectre 128, and you could run Mac software on
and
the
you
ST.
could buy a cheaper computer like Amiga or Atari, and you can have a Mac in there. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
right, because they all ran on a 6800 based processor, right?
68,000, yeah.
68,000, yeah.
There's an AMAX cartridge on eBay right now. I can't afford it, but I've always wanted one.
Yeah. That was kind of interesting that the Commodore, the Amiga, and the Atari ST, they become kind of like the spiritual successors to the color computer, because the color computer is based on the Motorola 6809, which everybody who programs on that says that was like working on a 68,000. You know, it's got 16-bit registers, and it's like, kind of like a 68,000 for 8 bits. And so it's kind of interesting that there was never a 68,000 base CoCo. Tandy just jumped ship there, but that processor predecessor that fueled a lot of systems. That 68,000 fueled Amiga, Atari ST, multiple generations of Macintosh-based systems. A plethora of arcade machines ran off of that 68,000, and later on game systems like the Sega Genesis and the Neo Geo. So a lot of things ran on 68,000 generation CPUs.
The Macintosh was prototyped on a 6809 processor.
Yeah, that's true. So technically, you would think that the Amiga, from a processor perspective, should be able to run comparable software to the Mac, but the software just didn't exist. I don't think it was a hardware limitation, right? It was more of an application limitation, right?
Yep. I think personally, the problem was that the way it was designed, it was very, very much designed by engineers, and the Macintosh was more designed by a little bit more designers. You know what I mean? Because the applications were all had the same look and feel, and when you learn one thing, you could learn the other ones because they put and everything in the same place. And Amiga didn't do that; they do it their own way, each and every one. So
and
that was very difficult.
That whole template of the user interface, there was many years where you had to have a Mac if you wanted to do graphics designs. You had to have a Mac because even early Windows machines, they just didn't have the same horsepower to pull it off.
Or the fonts.
With the fonts. So that whole consistent menu bar across the top where every application had the same thing. Microsoft took a page from that playbook, and Windows eventually became that. But we also have to give credit to where this originated from. The Mac OS was heavily influenced by X Windows which is Xerox developed for Unix or for Xenix for their version or whatever it's called, right? So, so the X Windows the X Windows was designed. This graphical thing was designed years before, but the Mac is what brought it to the masses. And once we realized there's an easier way to compute, and form over function says a lot, right? If I've got a menu bar and this is user friendly and it's consistent, and we've got a smaller learning curve. Because if you recall, PCs, you had to have a keyboard template to put over the keyboard. If you're going to run Word Star, here's Control Function F Shift. Pat your head, rub your belly, jump on one foot to do something. Where on the Mac, it was just hit Edit, copy, paste, whatever, and.
I still have a few WordPerfect templates for DOS.
So there was like a keyboard template for each application because nothing was the same. Everybody wanted to do it their way. So you're saying the Amiga software was similar to that, right?
Yeah, unfortunately. And it was honestly, once you use the Mac and you get 1 hour using the Mac, you go back to Amiga and it was so clunky. Just to look and not trying to be jerk,
right.
Now it's a very powerful machine.
Well, to steal Jim Breen's thunder, who's typing in the whole history of the Amiga in the chat, the Amiga was designed by ex-Atari guys who did the Atari 800. They were game designers, whereas the Mac was designed by ex-Apple II people who designed the Apple II. The Apple II was never designed as a games machine.
No.
It ended up being decent for games, but wasn't a games machine like the Atari 800 was.
Yeah.
So the Amiga was more of its design as a game machine. It had custom
and the games were really amazing, to be honest.
Yeah. And basically the Sega Genesis is kind of a watered down Amiga. It didn't have the same graphics chips, but it had the same processor and things like that. So a lot of arcade titles that Sega made, like Outrun, was on the Amiga, and a lot of things like that. Because again, in the arcade, a lot of things ran off of 68,000 processor. So it was easy to kind of port some of that software. Yeah, I do remember hearing that story where Commodore started it, and then they needed some Atari funding to finish it. And so the Atari ST was almost an afterthought to kind of compete with the Amiga after it was done?
Well, the ST was a vanilla 68,000 machine that Jack Tramiel pretty much had them throw together. Kind of like, the CoCo was never designed as a CoCo. It was originally designed based on the Motorola model sheet, with the 6809. They provided a sample computer that was meant as a video text terminal. CoCo was originally sold in the stores as a video text terminal. That's why under the badge for the amount of memory, the K badge on the original silver CoCo 1s, there's a hole for the LED that used the modem activity light on the video text terminal. So the ST was kind of a reference design for the 68,000, and then they added in a few custom chips. But the 68,000 is a much more vanilla, the Atari ST, that is a much more vanilla 68,000 computer than is a Mac or an Amiga, which is why the ST can so easily emulate the Mac. Because I used to be on the mailing list for that guy David Small, Gadgets by Small, and he did the Spectre GCR emulator, and it's an amazing piece of engineering that he could get the Atari ST to so closely emulate Mac Plus.
Wow.
And the other guys, Artie, A-R-D-I, I can't think of his name, Cliff Matthews. He re-implemented the whole Mac ROM set originally on the Next computer, and then started porting it to Linux and Windows and DOS. And he was going to do a clean room implementation of the Mac ROMs so that you could run Mac software on a PC or a Linux box or the Next system. Because he originally wrote it so he could run Word on his Next box.
We have a brain.
We've just been joined by Jim Breen of Retro Innovations. And so hopefully he can set us straight on all things Commodore and history at this point.
I have been recommending Jim's products all over on the Commodore boards because his stuff is really good stuff for Commodore people.
And your next check's in the mail.
Thank you.
No problem.
Just send it in hardware.
Okay, will do.
Jiffy DOS and ROM switchers and all sorts of cartridge boards. Oh my God.
So, I was going to point out that the Commodore folks tended to fall into two camps probably in the 86 timeframe because so the Apple II folks got really upset when the Macintosh came out. Well, they didn't really get upset when the Macintosh came out, but they got really upset when Steve Jobs decided to push the Macintosh and really just kind of pushed the Apple II and all the product line off to the side because he wanted to focus on the Macintosh, right? And so when the Apple II folks saw that, you know, there was a lot of resentment around the Mac because it was cannibalizing the hearts and minds of the Apple employees, and the products were coming out with the Mac as opposed to the Apple II line, like the GS and whatnot. They kind of crippled the GS because they didn't want to compete with the Macintosh platform and whatnot. Commodore was the same way because Commodore felt like they needed to get into this 16-bit space, and the Lorraine was, you know, that they needed more money. Amiga needed more money in order to finish the design, and Commodore swooped in with a black sheep offer and picked up the tech, and then kind of started to work on building it out as a desktop machine as opposed to, like you said, a games machine. But then they really pushed it, and for a while there in the middle to late 80s, Commodore really didn't even want to talk about their older 8-bit platform. Everything they wanted to do was Amiga. And so a bunch of the Commodore folks started out as, oh, hey, look, there's this cool new machine. And then when those folks realized that the platform, that 16-bit platform and then 32-bit platform was going to take all of the, the limelight away from, or the spotlight away from the 8-bit platform, then there was the same kind of resentment. So there was a number of Commodore 8-bit or kind of classic 8-bitter resources that were very resentful of the Amiga, not just, to your point, of just people who felt like it wasn't a good desktop publishing platform. Some folks were just upset about it because the Commodore they didn't want to, and from a pure business standpoint, it probably makes sense. They didn't want to focus any attention on their 8-bit platform. They wanted everybody to trade their 8-bit Commodores in and get a low-end Mac. Like when the 500 came out, I think they had a deal where you could get like $200 or $300 off of a new Amiga 500 if you would send in your old Commodore 64, because they really wanted to get them out of the marketplace and they wanted to get Amigas on everybody's desktops.
Wow.
So it's unfortunate that Irving Gould, who was kind of the larger stakeholder, larger shareholder of Commodore, ticked off Jack so much, because I think Jack Tramiel was really he was really the lifeblood and the reason that Commodore kind of became the largest selling platform in the home computer wars, and who knows what would have happened to Commodore and the Amiga line had Jack stayed at Commodore. But Irv ticked him off, and so he packed up right after the Plus 4 came out and moved over to Atari. And he knew, because he had background information, he knew about the Amiga purchase, or the impending Amiga purchase. In fact, he tried to put a hold on it because Atari had they had a right to refuse on the purchase of the company, because they had kind of seeded it with some initial money as a way to think about it as a new 16-bit platform or 16-bit game platform. But Commodore ended up winning and having that. I think when Jack moved over to Atari, I think he was hoping that he could break the stranglehold that Commodore had on that contract and pull the Amiga into the Atari, and so the Amiga would have been an Atari product, not a Commodore product.
That would have been interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to acknowledge a few people in the live chat that I missed earlier too. So probably around a half hour ago, Russell Flowers said hi everyone. So hey Russell. So a lot of people are chatting. It's kind of hard to, even though we've got a small panel, there's actually a lot of activity because I'm streaming to Facebook and YouTube. There's a lot of chats coming in from 2 different places, so it's a little bit hard for me to keep on top of these live chats. So I want to say hi to Russell Flowers. And then Brian Mathern just came in on Facebook Live and said hello too, so hello Brian. So on the panel right now, we're talking about all things retro. Ron Delvaux is with us, Al Hartman, Grant Leighty, Jason the CoCo Man, Reighard, Javier, Rivera, Rivera or Riviera?
Rivera.
Javier Rivera, and then Jim Brain from Retro Innovations, all with us on the call. And Brian's on Facebook. And so, yeah, we're just talking about retro stuff. The conversation just leaded towards Commodore. And we were talking about the kind of the rivalries and the fanboys and the loyalties and some of the animosities that existed back then versus now. You know what? Go ahead, Ron.
I was going to say it isn't much different than classic cars or cars in general.
Like Ford versus Chevy versus Mopar.
I'm a Mopar guy.
Mopar, right?
Mopar.
Yeah.
All my life. So
But do we have anything of Calvin peeing on another computer?
Pissing on an apple, right? So, but what Jim was explaining, and I can understand how this somewhat feel of betrayal. Like, hey, we've been Apple II people, and now you've got this new, Mac, and now we're Commodore 64 128 people. Now you have this new Amiga. It almost sounds like what happens when you when you get a divorce, or you get a new marriage, and now there's this new sister, or there's like a new child that comes into the family, and now they're getting all the love. And hey, I was here first, I was here longer, and now this new little shit baby you guys getting all the love, and I feel left off. I mean, it's just because there is an emotional attachment. You do become loyal to a product, to a system, and you can feel that sense of betrayal. It could be very real, very emotionally real. I can understand that.
Well, listen, when I was a kid, my dad taught me how to work on Mopar. That's what we had. And then you learn that. That's what you know. And then somebody brings over a Buick and says, can you look at this for me? And I go, no. It's all French. It's some other language. They have different gizmos in there.
But this internal rivalry at Apple was purposeful. Steve Jobs segregated the Macintosh group into their own building, and they would raise a pirate flag, and they were very competitive with the Apple II division when they were getting the Lisa out, and then eventually the Macintosh. It's a very purposeful competition between the two sides of Apple.
And go ahead, Javier.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you guys are interested in that, you should watch this movie called Pirates of Silicon Valley.
Oh, yeah.
An old movie, but it's very good and it's very accurate. More accurate than the new ones from Steve Jobs, of course.
Right.
Woz said it wasn't that accurate, that they had combined a bunch of things.
Right, but that is more accurate than the new ones.
Well, yeah, better than some of the new fictionalized things. But there was something that were compressed in there. And then there's that other show. What is it called?
Halt and Catch Fire is pretty good, yeah.
I lived through those times. It was nothing. They really fictionalized a lot of that.
Yeah.
Well, it's a show. You always have to do that. But you know what? When you talk about, what you guys were just explaining, how Apple created this own divide, even with its own employees and its own culture, that seems really diabolical. But because here's the funny thing: like my wife is the most non-technical person on the planet. Despite the fact she's married to me, my wife's mother worked for Dell for years, developing the BIOS for the Optiplex line. And so she used to write Dell BIOS in assembly, and knows how to do that, but doesn't know how to operate a computer, and her and her husband, they both worked for IBM. IBM had a plant in Boca for years, like we're off of Yamato Road over by like kind of Boca del Rey kind of area. And a lot of DOS was worked on in Boca, a lot of early versions of DOS that would become Windows 95 and some OS2 stuff. A lot of that stuff was developed in Boca Raton, and so these my in-laws were both former IBMers on developing software, and they were saying that internal to IBM, that when IBM came out with the PC, that the people who worked for IBM were very much against that PC. They didn't want to support it. They were going out of their way to not make it successful because they were still living on the legacy of IBM just being this big iron company. We make big machines. You know, this personal computer thing is a joke. And so internally, they were almost kind of self-destructive philosophy towards making this new product that was almost like it was set up for failure before it launched, you know?
Hey, well, did the people that made the CoCo, and they were making other computers at the time, did they have the same hand in the CoCo as they did in like Model 1, 4, 3? You know, were all those people a mixture, or did they have divisions?
That's a Tandy question, and I don't know that I know the answer to that. I mean, I think some of that's probably in Boise's book, but I would say that they were probably definitely the Z80 line was a different set of engineers than the CoCo line.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's true because the CoCo was made in collaboration with Motorola. It was not, you know, I think Motorola approached Tandy with the success of the Model 1 and the Model 3 and said, you know, we have this chip and we want to get it out there, and here's a reference design. You could base a home computer on that. And of course, Tandy was selling the Videotex terminals, so it wasn't hard to adapt that into a home computer.
It's a shame that the CoCo ended up, I mean, it didn't really stray that much further from the reference design. The reference design and the color computer 1, 2, and I mean, the 3 brought in a little bit of additional addressing modes and the MMU, but really the reference design is just all over. The DNA of the reference design is just all over the CoCo. It never really moved too much beyond that, which is unfortunate because I think there was a number of places it could go.
I wish we had gotten to see the deluxe CoCo. I know there were 2 boards out there, but
but the deluxe CoCo, I mean, it had some more peripherals, but I mean, it didn't really change. You know, it didn't really change the fundamental setup of you know, the environment. I mean, at the time when the color computer, like the 2 and the 3 came out, there were a lot of different like paging systems, ability to add additional memory, ability to bank in partial memory banks, so you can have ROM and RAM and I/O and some combination of those. All the machines tended to have some flavor of that, right at that time frame, and started to move beyond their kind of initial roots. You know, and you know, why the deluxe color computer just added a few more bells and whistles. I think it could have been much more. I'm not sure that the reason it didn't see the light of day is because it didn't offer enough. You know, it didn't offer quite enough to generate the necessity to bring out the new machine. I don't know, but it's just
as
a
an
theory.
Radio Shack employee, I think I can say with authority that they made so many missteps, so many marketing missteps. I was not at all surprised when they went out of business. They just didn't know what they were doing. I think the success of the Model 1, the Model 3 was accidental. I don't think they could have done that on purpose if they had tried. I mean, the Model 1 at one time was one of the top-selling home computers in the country, and mostly because of all the outlets. There were more places to buy a Model 1 than you could buy a Commodore.
Yeah, there were people that basically said that everything that Radio Shack did that was successful is because it was still riding the wave of Charles Tandy's original vision, and once he was gone, you know, it was just really going to be all downhill from there.
Did Charles Tandy have a son?
Yeah.
And did he run it? Because that's what happens sometimes. The son takes over, and then
but
those die.
So Charles Tandy was kind of like the Steve Jobs of them, and once you lose that vision, there was just nobody else that had it. Oh, so Brian just gave us a little bit of a little backstory here too. He says, I still have my CoCo 2, which has 64K extended basic. The computer I got in Christmas '84 while I was in 8th grade taking computer literacy class where we learned on the same model, except at school it was 16K color basic. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, I don't know of too many schools that had color computers in the school. I think a proud moment for me was I went to a school in Miami called Norland. In my junior high school, when I was in junior high, it was all Apple IIs. And by the time I got to high school, what had happened was they had replaced, like I think in my last year of high school, they had replaced all of the Apples in the computer classes with CoCo 2s. And so the computer teachers actually asked me to come back and kind of be this, alumnist and this kind of evangelicist for the CoCo. So I was showing them what you could do with the CoCo. I was showing them some of the demos from the Rainbow magazine and things like that. And they were like really blown away. And that was so cool for me to say, yeah, listen, man, all those years you guys were working on those crappy Apple IIs. Now here's what a real computer can do for you. So,
hey.
So, yeah, that was kind of a cool moment. So Brian says, and we were learning color logo instead of basic. Yeah, that logo was an educational language, right, to help make it easy for people to learn how to use a computer, sort of, right?
Very popular back then.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a CoCo 1 with the Rochester school system sticker on it. So that came from a classroom somewhere in Rochester.
Yeah. So logos was supposed to, what do you got there, Javier?
Apple II logo.
Apple II logo, huh? Not too long ago, it was like later last year, our foreign correspondent Nick Marentes was at the Australian K-Fest, and they actually had a physical turtle. It was like a robot dome turtle connected to a serial port, and you could run logo commands onto it and actually move the physical turtle around in the real world. So it was like if you think about it, it was like a augmented reality before that phrase was even coined, but there was an actual like motorized turtle that could be programmed in logo to move around and stuff.
They had back then for the Apple II.
Yeah.
The color computer never had that, but the Apple II version did have
the kind of robotic turtle.
Yeah, but it was not wireless; it was wired.
Yeah. It was on a harness. Yeah.
But just think about all the platforms that never even made it into an educational system, right? I didn't know that color computers were made inroads. I knew there were a lot of Apples. I knew some places had Commodores. I don't know if there were Ataris in classrooms or not, but I am pretty sure I never saw Coleco Atoms in an educational situation. And TI 994As, I don't remember them being very prevalent in the education system either. And
the Ataris were used in education.
Okay.
Here we go with my history. I used to work for a company called Lawrence S. Epstein Associates, who was the East Coast distributor for Corvus drives. And one of our clients was Fordham Preparatory School in the Bronx. And there was a teacher there, Father Nick Lombardi, I think was his last name. He had a whole computer lab set up with Atari 800s running Corvus network, and he wrote custom software that taught Latin and one other language. I can't remember the other language. And it was all written on Atari 800s. Corvus hard drives. We ran these flat cables. They look like hard drive or floppy cables. The flat cables through the ventilation system. It was a horrendous install, but it was like our gem of an install. And the adapters to run the hard drives would run through the joystick ports. That was the very largest install. I forget how many. He had about 200 Atari 800s network, because you could run up to 255. So he had two separate classrooms with 100 in each classroom running.
I think it was really smart on Apple's, because Apple got in early. I don't know what type of deal they made with public schools, but in at least in Southeast Florida, I grew up in Miami, Apple IIs were everywhere. All the schools had them. So I have to think they had to have made a deal. And I don't know if they were given away at cost or close to cost, but they were, number one, they were getting a lot of units sold and delivered and out in the wild. But number two, which was brilliant, is that a lot of kids would then say to their parents, hey, you got to buy me an Apple II because I'm doing a computer class.
Right,
and,
that's right.
And in order for me to work on this floppy disk here and work on this program and do my homework, I need an Apple computer to do that. So if they did give it away, they probably sold at least 10 to 20% of those units to kids whose parents had the cash to get them an Apple II with disk at home to work on this, you know. But Apple was really brilliant about getting in the public schools. And I don't know if there was a lot of profit margin there or not, but it was a great move that helped solidify the brand and the company, you know.
Well, Oregon Trail, disguised as an educational program, probably sold more Apple IIs than just about anything else.
Yeah. Carmen San Diego too. It's kind of educational, right? So
when I was in high school in '69, they had a IBM Selectric setup. It was attached to a mainframe somewhere, and the monitor was the paper coming out of it. It had the ball, you know, that went back and forth. And we played Hangman and stuff on that. And back then, computer was always thought to be something an institution would have, not a personal person.
Right.
I mean, so when I was 14, like when you guys were 14, we just had the exposure we had was those cards, you know, in a rack. Computer class my wife went to, she was 2 years younger than me. She learned how to program a box of cards, you know, and not drop them.
That's something I've never done. I've got a box of unpunched punch cards here, but I've never had to submit a program with punch cards.
In 77, when Radio Shack came out, there was no way for me to see any other computer except going to Radio Shack and seeing their computer in the window. And it was amazing to see an actual computer that you could own at home. So you go in there and ask the guy, could you show us how it works? You know? And they, you know, either be busy trying to sell it and they say, can't do it now, you have to come back. And come back when they were slow. Come back when they're slow, and then he'd show them. You know, and he's having to read the manual because he don't even know what
well, I think that's one thing that really worked. And maybe you have the worst case there, but I was really lucky. I was a 12-year-old snot-nosed kid, and I got interested in computers, and they actually let me hang out in the store. And I don't know if it was deliberate or not, but what happened was, you know, number one, I ended up becoming a customer. Number two, I was learning about the system, which was actually helping them sell systems. So, you know, I started hanging out at Radio Shacks when I was 12. I didn't get a job there till I was about 18. So they had 6 years of me being an uncommissioned salesperson where I was hanging out doing the demos of the machines, answering questions, showing how to make software, how to use software. And so by them letting me hang out there in the store, I helped sell a lot of systems. I don't know that you could have done that at a Sears with an Atari system. They wouldn't just let a kid hang out there and beat on that thing and program in it and learn how to use it. Most of these other systems like Atari and Commodore, they were sold through like retail department stores. And I don't think you could have hung out there and beat on the machine and learned it like I was lucky to learn it and have this. I kind of grew this affection for the computers. And I became very loyal to Tandy and Radio Shack because they literally were like my daycare. You know, when I got after school, I went to Radio Shack and hung out and just played on computers. So it was a different time, you know.
Yeah, they also weren't worried about you breaking it, I don't think. You know what I mean? Like today's kids, they pick up something and you know, start taking it apart.
Yeah.
I started out the same way. When I bought my first Model 1 at 17, I drove the salespeople crazy asking questions, and they couldn't answer the questions. And at some point, they were sending people to me, giving out my phone number to answer questions, and I ended up getting hired by the store. Person.
Yeah, I mean, I was told all the time when you turn 18, you got a job here, kid. You know, so.
Well, I bought a Model 1 because I was at a Star Trek convention in Manhattan, and a guy had a Model 1 set up on a table, and he was demoing his version of Super Star Trek. And he was selling his version of the game. And I said, give me your card, I'm going to buy this. He says, kid, you're never going to buy $1,000 computer just to play this game. I did the 1978 version of, here, hold my beer. And within a year, I had a Model 1. and the guy never sent me his information to buy his game. So I ended up buying the David Al book and typing in Super Star Trek from the David Al book, which I never got working. The only way I got a working version was I downloaded it like 10 years ago, but the one I typed in I still have on tape never finally worked. I never fully debugged it. But then
we need to fix that. You need to get that and post it somewhere so we can help you get it working for you.
There you go. I was at a Radio Shack sales meeting because I was a store employee, and I said, listen, you guys should have a Radio Shack table at every Star Trek convention and demo the machines, because that's why I bought a Model 1. At the Star Trek convention, the people there are very much into technology and computers.
Sure.
And they called me a space cadet and didn't
live long and prosper. Right.
That was an example of Tandy's, or at least that particular regional manager's savvy in marketing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, if you think about it now, anytime a new movie is going to come out, like especially to do with like Marvel superheroes and stuff, like they debut at Comic-Con. They know now that these geek conventions are a way to this is where you want to premiere things, because these are the fans, right? The geeks are the fans. So all these panels and all these movie premieres and stuff, they happen at Comic-Con now. They didn't have that vision back then to do something like a Star Trek convention to promote it, because that's your demographic right there. If you're into, like you say, if you're into Star Trek, you're going to be into computers.
And you're a college kid with some disposable income.
Yeah.
And you can dual purpose the computer to write your reports and do, whatever. Yeah. I ended up buying it for games when it was not a gaming computer. The Model 1 was far from a gaming computer, although it can play some nice games.
I've got some ads that say it's got amazing fast action graphics. I should play one of those Radio Shack commercials.
Yeah, that wouldn't be my first thought when I thought of a Model 1.
My sister turned over a Galaxy Invasion at least 10 times on my Model 1.
Wow.
Which was like Galaxian on the Model 1.
It's impressive though how people ended up with certain allegiances to certain environments or communities depending solely upon how they entered the market, right? Because a lot of people probably became Atari fanatics because their first machine was an Atari VCS, and then when they wanted a home computer, they went and bought an Atari because that was their first kind of thought process. And then there were some of us who had a need for a computer, and there was a point where, save the Timex Sinclair, which was available at like $99, the cheapest home computer you could buy was probably the Commodore VIC-20. And so some folks entered the communities that way, and so then became Commodore folks. Wow. Folks who started at the color computer probably ended up, they were at Radio Shack all the time, and there was the $199 or $249 color computer, and they entered that way.
We never got them here in the United States, except in a I can't use that word, in a butchered version. The ZX Spectrum was one of the biggest selling computers.
It was. It was. Yeah, but it never showed up. But that time, the Timex Sinclair was kind of... The Timex Sinclair ended up being kind of the Yugo of computers, right? I mean,
it was an Edsel.
Yeah, well, you would get a ZX... Well, the Timex 1000, the same thing as the ZX.
Yeah.
You'd get them for free if you went to go to a seminar.
Yeah,
that's right.
Something.
I mean,
with all these computers we've been using.
They make great monitor stands.
Yeah, they do. Or doorstops.
How many of you guys' parents are computer literate today? My mother's 86, and she's on Facebook. She never was interested in my color computers, or when I went to the IBMs, and stuff. And all those years, she never looked at it. I told her about the internet and stuff. Yeah, not interested. My dad was into it some, or he passed away in '92. But my mother is now calling me saying she's, guess what?
Yeah.
There's a couple of Italians that I didn't know that were Italians. And she's telling me all this new stuff.
That's wonderful.
And sometimes she'll say, "How come you don't respond to Mom? Mom sends you a message and you don't respond."
Listen, Mom, I've unfollowed you.
Really? When she calls me, she goes, "The internet's down. What am I supposed to do?" I said, watch TV. I'm tired of TV. I want to be on the internet. Can you come and fix it? I go, yeah, I'll come. I'll be right there. I come there. She's already got it working. And she's busy doing stuff. Yeah.
The main computer use is not age, it's fear. If you can get fear and you just learn, get there. It's just, that's what I tell people.
But I gotta tell you, when I joined into the Apple II group in Facebook, I was under the impression that, like you just say, you know, if you come from a certain computer, you stay in that computer. Mm-hmm. So I was expecting that all these guys in the group, they use Macintosh nowadays, you know, just like I did. I moved to Macintosh from Apple II, and most of them were just you know, IBM PC guys or, you know, Windows guys, and I was really surprised. And I had some arguments with people, and I asked them, why you guys are like this? I thought you were going to be in Apple II. I'm sorry, Macintosh. And they say, no, because Apple II was like terminal. And, you know, the normal thing to go from an Apple II is to another computer with terminal. And Macintosh never had a terminal. So these guys went to PC because it had a terminal.
Oh, like a command prompt, right?
That's funny.
So Macintosh didn't have
a Windows shocking.
Well, the Macintosh started off as a strictly GUI-based operating system. The original Mac OS, there was no terminal.
Never had a terminal.
There were terminal emulators where you could use a modem, but there was no command prompt. There was,
the Amiga had a terminal, command line interface.
Yep.
Because it was like Windows in that there was a DOS, Amiga DOS, and then on top of that was the graphical workbench.
Well, I think the big thing to understand is the Amiga, the chipset for the Amiga had a text mode, right? Mm-hmm. There was an 80 by 25 mode, an 80 by whatever mode, right? The CoCo had text modes. The Commodore had text modes. The IBM PC started out in text mode. There, underneath all that VGA and everything else, there's an 80 by 50 or an 80 by 25 or an 80 by 43 text mode. There is no text mode on a Mac. None. Right?
None.
That's right.
None. I was porting. I worked for this guy for the Brooklyn school system. He wrote software to teach autistic kids basic skills, and we had started out together on the Apple II version. Then I ported that, the Quick Basic, on the IBM PC, and he wanted me to port that to the Mac. And I kept explaining to him, we can't port this to the Mac as an exact duplicate of the PC and the Apple II versions, because there's no text mode on the Mac. You can't make a text mode application on the Mac. If I put this to the Mac, I've got to redesign a new graphical interface, and everything has to be done with the mouse and minimal keyboard. And he fired me, and then a year later he hired another programmer who finally convinced him of it, and then he ended up porting the Windows version to a graphical interface version that looked like the Macintosh. It was so funny at the time.
I just wonder if, you know, Burrell, who did a lot of the original designs for the Macintosh, I forget his last name or his first name, but you know, he was the one that laid out the boards and whatnot and did all the, you know, did all the graphics and the setting up the memory and the processor and everything else. I just wonder if they originally had a text mode, an actual honest to goodness text mode designed into the board. Jobs came in and said, you know, because Jobs wanted everything that didn't have to be in the machine out, right? He, you know, expansion slots, you don't need expansion slots. Fan, no, you don't need fans. Openings in the case, you don't need those. Get rid of those. And I just wonder if that was one of the things, like because Burrell came from the Apple II side, and so he would have probably put a text mode in there to say, well, you know, if I need some debugging or I want to use a terminal or something, maybe I need to put a text mode in it. I just wonder if Jobs came in one day and were like, what's this stuff? Well, it's to do a text. This thing will never need text. Get rid of it.
I don't think the Mac even had a monitor like the Apple II had.
No.
Yeah. Well, no. I mean, it was easiest, I'm sure, for them when they were done to put it in as it was just a dot addressable chunk of memory, right? It was the screen.
The big thing was the square pixels.
It was.
The best thing I can think of when I was growing up, you know, or whatever, and we saw the Macintosh, was down the road when they made aquariums on them. It was cool.
Yeah. But you know, the Lisa did not have square pixels.
No, it didn't.
When they sold Macintosh XL kits to upgrade a Lisa, one of the things they did was change the video board so that the Lisa had square pixels.
Right. Because remember, what made really big the Macintosh was, first of all, the ease of use, and second, that it was very pointed towards the design group. And designers need to be able to do the what you see is what you get. And the only way to do that was with square pixels. So the square pixels will be the same as a dot in a printed place,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
Per inch. So that was a big win. Some people don't understand that because they were used to normal, text mode and all that. But when you see it graph, and then when you put the paper next to the monitor, it was a big deal to be able to see it really the same.
Yeah, that WYSIWYG you're talking about. I remember the Mac 2 when it came out. We had a Mac 2 system with a big CRT. And it was big enough where I could have 2 pages side by side. Right. And I could literally hold up an 8.5 by 11 in front of the monitor, and the light would shine through, and what I printed matched exactly what was on that screen. So the dots per inch on the monitor versus the dots per inch on the paper, it was true WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. As far as what's on the screen what you see on the screen is literally what it's going to look like on the paper. And
it took a lot of time for other computers to do the same thing, because the PC that was the one that followed still had the long pixels because of the resolution.
Yeah.
And you didn't want to do it like 512 by 512 like Macintosh did.
Yeah, the oblong resolution.
In the CoCo days, people would do newsletters using CoCoMax because it had all the fonts.
I did.
Yeah. Well, the print shop also had a lot of nice fonts, and actually got.
Yeah, there was the print shop clone newsroom.
Well, and you could do what you see is what you get on the. I mean, just because you didn't have square dots, what didn't mean that you couldn't reproduce on the printer what was exactly on the screen. It just needed to scale. I mean, it could be done. It was just square dots made it so much easier to do all the calculations, right? Because you knew if you drew a circle and you put 200 pixels on the right and 200 pixels down, you knew you had a circle. Every other machine, you had an ellipse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll tell you, one of the products that I wish Zebra had finished, and I could never talk Stuart into doing it, he went off on a crazy tangent doing a car sign designer that did those baby on board signs.
Bunch of fonts.
Was doing a CoCo, using the CoCo graphics designer engine that Jeff Street, our programmer, had written to do a what you see is what you get word processor that was Mac-like on the CoCo. I know a couple other people did it later, but I wanted Zebra to get there first. And Stuart just decided the car sign designer was more important. And of course, he wanted to do it for every platform at once. So he ended up doing it for Apple II, Commodore, CoCo, and never did get them all done in time. By the time he got them all done, the whole fad of the baby on board signs was gone. I have a box in my storage room full of thousands of those yellow signs and suction cups.
Hey, I just want to let's get ready to take a quick pause here for a break, and let's decide if we want to keep going. Which I'm okay to keep going if you want, but we've been doing this for about 2 hours now. I definitely want to take a quick break.
I think I'm gonna bow out.
Okay, all right, Ron Delvaux, thanks for being here. But I want to go back and just finish looking at a few messages that had appeared in the live chat earlier. So Brian Mathern was when he was talking about logo and the computers in his classroom. He did say that because we talked about it was Atari in the classroom. He said that at his school there was maybe 1 or 2 Atari XLs, and then there was a computer science lab next to that had a couple of Model 3s, and then some schools in New Orleans actually had C64s in the classrooms at the time, which I am not familiar with too many schools having C64s. Now, somebody else who's watching on Twitch, because I'm multi-streaming to everywhere right now. He told me that, hey, I should tell you that you're in follow-only mode. And I'm not even sure what that means on Twitch. But does that mean you can't? I don't know what follow-only mode means on Twitch. But thanks for letting me know, Nudge the Puppy. But I don't exactly know what that means. And then Brian was talking about the Vectrex in 1982 and the CoCo in 1984. 2600 Junior in 86 was my entrance into computers and video games. All right, so we're getting some more more sharing there of some of those systems. So that's kind of cool. All right, so we've been at this now for 2 hours and 20 minutes, and this is cool. I love talking about this kind of stuff. But we're going to take a quick break. We'll see if we have any more to talk about, or maybe some parting thoughts and closing thoughts, and then we'll be back and then either continue or wrap it up. So hold on, folks.
CoCoTALK After Dark. CoCoTALK After Dark.
Hey, this is Eric, and you're listening to CoCoTALK.
Don't tell me my commercials have screwed up again, dude. This happened to me earlier today. Dude, I don't know what's going on with that. So screw the commercials. That has happened twice already, and I don't know why.
Embrace the darkness.
Embrace the darkness of no commercials.
I'll just go to the old switcheroo format. It's okay.
Yeah, right. So,
you could also get yourself a
yeah,
coffee mug like this with a.
It's kind of screwed up. I don't know what's going on. So whatever. We're done with
It's
commercials.
a demo of the new CoCo game, A Black Cat in a Cave.
A black cat in a cave, and after dark. Right.
After Dark, the new Colossal Cave Adventure.
Right. So Ken says that he had Commodore 64s. Your brother Ken, Jason.
Right. We had Commodore 64s in the computer lab, and he's a few years older than I am. And then later on, after he was gone, they started to replace the Commodore 64s with Mac Classics on a network. Most of the Macs did not have hard drives, and there was an SE that had a hard drive in it that you could save to on the network, and that's what we had in the computer lab at the one school I was at, and then we also had some different Apple IIs in the library.
We had Commodores in the junior high for the computer lab.
Right, and the other thing was that there was some kind of interface there where only every four they were in rows of four, so 4 computers would have to share a floppy drive.
Yep, that was a program from a company called Skiles Electric Works, and there's some other ones. Commodore actually produced a thing. Handic made it, and Commodore rebranded. It was called the VIC switch. It would allow you to share share one drive among multiple computers. Because the drives were, that's the problem with the Ataris. Used a pretty simple pseudo-intelligent drive. CoCo's had the FD501 card or whatnot, so it was kind of a cartridge-based floppy drive system. The Commodore had an entire other computer that ran inside the disk drive. So when you were buying a computer and a disk drive, you were really buying 2 computers. Because the Commodore had an entire 6502, 2K of RAM, 16K of ROM system built into it. So it was the equivalent of a VIC-20 without the video running on the disk drive. And that's all it did. But, at the time, right, I mean, a computer system motherboard was probably $100, $125. So you had to build that into the cost. And so therefore, schools were like, well, we can't do this, right? We'll have to share a drive. We need the computers because we need the keyboards and the video cards, but the disk drives we could share. At least it was better than cassette tapes, right? Because cassette tapes would have taken forever to load your stuff.
The other thing about the Commodore disk drives is they stayed pretty compatible across the whole line, because the original Commodore PETs used a disk drive that you could use on a Commodore 64 or a VIC-20 because it used the same connector.
Not the PETs. The PETs used the IEEE connector. The other ones used a serial connector.
Oh, I thought the user port worked with the later drive, with the early.
No, Commodore used the same 12 24 pin edge connector, but it's not the same.
Oh, I'm
it's
sorry.
Not the same protocol. No, but they did do that. I mean, they did. So, that was the thing, right? That was so people may know Chuck Peddle who designed he was one of the folks who designed the 6502 microprocessor, and he came from Motorola. And the reason, so it's unfortunate that, we have this big rivalry between the 65XX crowd and the 68XX crowd, because they originally were all one crowd. Motorola came out with the 6800, and a bunch of the designers said, yeah, it's a great CPU. Can we get it cost reduced? Can we get it down in cost? Because we really want to get this out to everybody. And Motorola's like, no, we want to sell it for like $100 a chip or whatever. And so there was a bunch of them, and they were like, yeah, we're done with this. We're going to go off somewhere else. And they got picked up by Moz Technology, and they were like, we want to put out a microprocessor like the 6800, and we want to do it like $25 a chip. And so that's what that's the whole claim to fame for Moz, was they were going to build the chip, and that's the reason it's in the Apple II and the Atari and the Commodore and whatnot, is because it was a lot cheaper than the 6800. But
the Apple could use both the 6502 and a 6800.
6800, that's right. Because at the time, I think Woz may have even started out with the 6800, but then he got the samples of the 6502, and at the end, when they were trying to figure out how to sell the unit, he was doing, Woz did the whole calculations, and he's like, hey, I got to sell my bus anyway, right? And how many more Apple Ones or Apple IIs or whatever at the time they were doing that, how many more can we sell if we buy 6502 chips as opposed to 6800s? And the answer is probably a bunch, because the CPU was considerably cheaper. But anyway, Petal was designed, and when he came over to Moz, they did the Chem 1, and then he's like, hey, Jack, I could make a whole computer system. And Jack's like, well, go for it. And that's where the PET came from, right? But then people were like, well, the PET's not that useful without a disk drive. And so Chuck went over and he built another whole system into the disk drive. And Jack the story goes that he was just so mad at Chuck Petal because he had created this monstrosity for a disk drive. The Dual was the 2040 disk drive. It was two big, huge, it's a boat anchor. I mean, it literally is a boat anchor. And it had this big, huge IEEE connector. And the reason it did is because I think Chuck was familiar with the Hewlett-Packard diagnostic equipment, like logic analyzers and oscilloscopes and whatnot. And at the time, Hewlett-Packard used this thing called the Hewlett-Packard interface bus, which was this big IEEE connector. And so Chuck designed that same protocol and whatnot, at least at the low level. He used the same kind of protocol to interface the computer to the disk drive. So the disk drive was atrociously expensive. The PETs were atrociously expensive. This cable was atrociously expensive. And so when Jack decided he was going to do something that was cheaper, they were trying to come out with a color PET and some other things, and Jack's like, no, I want to put a computer in everybody's home, and it needs to be like $300 or something like that. And when they did up the bill of materials and they realized that big, huge connector and the cable and all that was going to add a lot of cost to it, Jack was like, I don't want any of that cost. Get rid of all that cost. And so then that's when they went to the serial-based kind of drive communication they had. But the problem, and it's documented, but they were going to originally have it so that it was as fast as the IEEE connectors, and the PET drives run really fast, and so it's obvious Commodore knew how fast disk drives could be and transferring data over. But through a bunch of stupid accidents and miscommunication and whatnot, we ended up with the Commodore drives, the serial-based drives that we do have, which are atrociously slow, which is what requires Jiffy DOS and all the speed-up routines. And it made the Commodore, Commodore had the great graphics and the sound and whatnot, but usually was mocked by the Ataris and the color computers and whatnot because the disk drives were so incredibly slow, even though they were intelligent.
The only drive slower than the 1541 is the Atari 810 drive. Those things are slow.
Yeah, that's true.
There was a parallel board you could put in the 800, and you could run parallel. I think it was called the ATR 8000, and you could run regular drives like a CoCo on an Atari 800.
Yep.
They were blazed.
So yeah. I think it's really cool that you guys didn't the color computer the TRS-80 Model 1, 3, and 4 group, the color computer group, the TI-99-4A crowd, none of them had to suffer through the really slow disk drive times because it was interminably slow. I mean, 300 bits per second or whatever. It was just it was terrible.
Because Tandy went in with Tandon and opened up a plant called Texas Peripherals, and they were making their own low cost reduced tandem disk drives, and that's what the CoCo went to, and what the Model 3 and Model 4s went to. And Tandy just wanted to keep the same drives because they had the production lines already going, and the more drives they could make that were the same, the least expensive, they could make more profit.
What people tend to not realize is that it is true that the Commodore drives are all like the serial drives and the IEEE drives. All the IEEE drives use the same. So all the PET drives use the same IEEE connector, and they all do IEEE 488. And all the home computer drives, so the Commodore VIC-20, the 64, the Plus 4, the 128, and all those machines used the serial bus. The Plus 4 had another drive that you could buy for it, but it also supported the serial drive machines, and they all would support the this serial protocol. But what people don't realize is that the original drive came out with the VIC-20, and it was really expensive. It was as much as a VIC-20 to buy because it was essentially another VIC-20, and it was atrociously slow. So we've already established that fact. But when they went to go and put the Commodore 64 together, they realized late in the production cycle they were just going to reuse the VIC-20 drive, right? It had already been designed, and the Commodore 64 was going to use all the same peripherals, same cassette tape, same joysticks, same disk drives or whatnot. And then at the very end of the cycle, they realized that the disk drive wouldn't always work. And what they realized is that as slow as the disk drive was, it was still too fast, and so they had to slow it down. And so the Commodore 1541 drive, which is what everybody remembers, is actually a slowed down version of what's already considered one of the slowest disk drives in the home computer market.
I read that there was a bug in the serial interface chip.
It was the VIA chip in the Commodore VIC-20, the Moz. So Moz had the 6522, which is the versatile interface adapter. It's like the 6821 or 6822 Motorola line. Because if you look at the Motorola line and the Commodore line, like all the chips are like they're like mostly equivalent. Like there's a 6X22 and 6X21, and they basically provide the same thing: peripheral interface adapters, versatile interface adapters, same kind of thing. But yeah, there was a shift register bug in the chip, and the people in the PET days knew about it, but they forgot to tell the home computer folks. And so there went your fast disk drive speed. It didn't get fast again until they came up with the 128, which they basically had fixed the bug by that time. But I just think it's funny that the VIC-20 had a disk drive that was already very slow, and then when they went to Commodore 64, they had to slow it down even further because it was flaking out some of the time loading files.
Wow. Yeah, I bought the Jiffy DOS ROM for my 64. A local guy here sold me a 64 and a 64C. So I just learned this new terminology, a bread bin 64, which is the original brown.
That's right, a bread bin. 64. Bread bin, that was the old style machine, and then the sloped case was the new style machine. But yeah. Those are
one of each.
Those are the terms. So.
And I put the Jiffy DOS in the 64. Boy, does that make a huge difference.
It does. It brings it up to... I still don't think that... I think, the CoCo... Because I hear Curtis talk a lot about how many mega reads or what kind of mega read speed that there is in OS 9 and whatnot. I still think that, having a parallel interface and basically direct computer access to the disk drive controller gives systems like the Tandy and the TI, the Texas Instruments, it gives those machines a considerable advantage over
the Atari
and the Commodore machines. So,
yeah, the Atari ST and the Amiga both used mostly standard disk drives. There are minor differences on the Amiga and the ST,
and they
this chain signal. But
yeah, and they had really fast data paths to those disk drives and whatnot, which it's great. I mean, people by that time everybody had learned by that time that people people wanted disk drives, and people wanted to not have to go get coffee and take a shower while they waited for their game to load.
And people expected disk drives to be faster than their tape drives.
Yeah, that was the thing for me on the color computer. I started on cassette, and it took a while to save. It took a while to load. And so the floppy drive was like mass storage and high-speed storage, compared to cassette. Hey,
there's
Nick,
no CoCo
yeah, Nick,
SDC or what's the CoCo Flash back in those days?
yeah. Nick Marentes has joined us from Australia. Good day, Nick.
G'day, yeah. I noticed the talk here is very technical, so I might leave.
Yeah,
don't leave.
I've got something here for you, Nick.
Far away.
Got lots of technical
It's not that troll again, is it?
Actually, the troll's been providing valuable contributions today. So.
Hey, wait a minute. I represent that remark.
Where's David Ladd when you need him?
That's right.
We need him. Hey, so Jim, did you answer all of Ken's questions? Ken was saying, is a stock 64 drive faster than a cassette?
Yeah, I told him it's just barely faster. So
Yeah.
I think the stock cassette was like maybe 150 bytes per second or something. I think the stock disk drive was like 300 bytes per second. So so maybe twice as fast, but still, you were expecting orders of magnitude faster when you got to the disk drive over the tape deck.
The Model 1 was 500 bytes per second, I think, and then the Model 3 was 1500.
Maybe.
And the CoCo was faster than the Model 1.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and they had things like, everywhere in early in the day, because disk drives were really expensive. A disk drive would set you back $250, maybe even $280 if you were buying one of these intelligent drives. And so people had to really work hard to decide when they were going to buy a disk drive. And so for a long time, there were things like like Compute Magazine, right? Everybody remembers Compute Magazine, and Compute's Gazette, which was a splinter, one of the splinter sister magazines or whatnot. And they had things like Turbo Tape and Fast Tape or whatever, and they would store the the encode stuff on the tape in a faster format or a quicker format, so that you can get that basically Turbo Tape, I know, was their big claim to fame was now your tape's as fast as a disk drive, actually faster than the disk drive, a stock disk drive, which was that gave a whole new lease on life, because at the time a cassette drive, one of the cheap cassette drives was maybe $40, $45-$50 maybe, whereas a disk drive was $250. So there was a considerable amount of, and most of us were still in our teens. We didn't have much discretionary cash.
Sure.
So that was $200 you didn't have to cough up, and that worked for a while. But then when you got things like the Tandy Color Computer 3 and whatever, and you had all this memory and you had to fill it with stuff, then the cassette became useless.
But you CoCo guys didn't have this problem that we had in the Model 1 days, where loading a cassette was a big problem because you had to constantly clean the heads and adjust the azimuth. There was a guy that made something we sold at Zebra called a Winky board, and there would be two LEDs that would blink with the cassette loading, and it would clean up the signal, and you would adjust the azimuth on the head so that the one light stayed bright and then the other light would blink. And if you adjusted it just right, you would get a good load every time. But obviously Tandy fixed the cassette loading circuit later on, and CoCo tapes loaded much cleaner without problems, even on the same cassette recorder.
It was always because the color computer used sine waves to generate the pulses on the tape, which are more reliable than the old square waves that the TRS-80 used.
Right.
Yeah, Nick did a lot of programming for the TRS-80 back in the day.
Yeah, my TRS-80 had the original ROMs, and it got stolen. And when the guy stole it, he took it to the repair center, and the guy ripped out my original ROMs, and he put in the later ROMs, and he ripped out my cassette modification, the XRX modification, so that my Model 1, I had to reverse it, put it back the way it was, because I preferred the XRX to the later ROM that kind of the ROM routine.
And Jason's going to give us
cool that now it's, let's see, a lot of these machines came out in 1980, 90, 00, 10, so we're almost 40 years in to the home computer kind of revolution, and there's a lot of passion, significant amount of passion for all the platforms. The ZX Spectrum's got a huge following. MSX got a huge following. TI's got a huge following. Tandy's got a huge following. Both the 6809 and the Z80 models. The K-Pro.
Nick is on the line. You can't say Z. You have to say Z.
That's right, Z.
Z.
That's right, ZX80 or ZX81.
People are still crazy about the ZX80s and the ZX81s. There's a guy.
It's an impressive. I mean, it did a lot with a little, right? So part of it is, and I saw just the other day there was an interview with a lady who is going to be building a new, classic, kind of a contemporary classic platform, and one of the quotes she had in the commentary was that. She felt like the constraints that were imposed by the platforms were what spurred people's creativity. So the fact that you didn't have access to everything that you might want, and so you had to kind of force the limited hardware to do what you wanted it to do was part of the whole creative genius.
Steve Bjork is emblematic of that. He squeezed stuff out of that system it was never designed to do.
Right. Well, yeah, that's right. And of course, you got they got the Apple, you got Kansas Fest, right? It comes up here not too long in the future. It's a whole week-long thing for the Apple II folks. And Color Computers got two big shows per year. One in the spring, and one here coming up late fall, early winter. Commodore's got like 3 or 4 coming through the year. TI's got one, or maybe more than one.
There's a guy in England, Tynemouth Software. He made a reproduction board of the ZX80, so you can build a whole new ZX80 with, and it's all TTL. It's not no ULA, nothing. It's all TTL. Build a ZX80. Run the ZX81 ROM on it, but it doesn't have the slow mode so it's basically a ZX80, but it's not quite the ZX81.
I just think that's cool, though. I mean, regardless of what all the particulars are, I think it's impressive that it's 38 years on, or maybe 40, depending on when you start the clock, and there's people who are still as passionate about the platforms today as we were when we were, significantly younger than we are now.
There's the Commodore 64 Reloaded. Jens is building. That's an amazing system. That's why I've been saying for years, I wish someone would just clone a CoCo. Get started on it doesn't have to have all the features all at once, but get a platform that can be built on over time and revised.
Yeah, we've actually got 3 of them now.
Yeah.
But those are PGA clones. They're not like this Tynemouth ZX80.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, like a hardware clone.
Clone a CoCo that you can take your old broken CoCo, transfer the parts over, but it has the VGA built in. Maybe it has stereo sound. Maybe it has a few little upgrades. But the problem with the other systems, they're all in progress. They're not done. The Mr. CoCo, the FPGA CoCos, all of those are wonderful, but they're not complete yet. They're still in development. There are still bugs. There's still incompatibilities. Everybody's working hard on them, but it's not the same as someone just cloning an actual CoCo that's already been mostly debugged and developed. I mean, that's just me. I would love a whole computer that would just go into my CoCo 3 case to replace the logic board, like this Commodore 64 Reloaded can upgrade a Commodore 64 or a, it's and there's even an Amiga 1000 clone out there where you can build this logic board and put it into your 1000 case, and it adds the PGA graphics and all the new stuff. An old 1000 case. I love my 1000. It's great, but it's expensive as hell to upgrade it, to add anything to make it, modern.
So how hard is that to do? I mean, does it make sense financially to try to reproduce the CoCo motherboard, knowing how big it costs to make a PCB and everything?
Well, I mean, you can see on eBay every so often those educational kits come up where it's a totally disassembled CoCo. You're supposed to take an electronics class, and part of the class was building the CoCo, and you'd solder all the components up. If someone grabbed one of those boards and had a board service scan that board, you would have an exact duplicate CoCo 2 board. I can't imagine anyone who owns the Tandy IP would care if someone were building current, boards with the based on the CoCo 2. Maybe they would. I don't really know who owns the Tandy IP anymore. It was AST, and then I think Sony bought AST, and then they put it on the shelf. So I don't really know who owns the IP for the CoCo anymore.
The thing is, it's not hard to find a CoCo 1 or a CoCo 2 computer on eBay anyway, fairly cheaply, and a lot cheaper than if another board was made. A CoCo 3 would be better to clone.
Yes.
Not a CoCo 1 and 2.
But, like the problems with CoCos are the keyboards are failing right and left. And you have to buy an expensive adapter to put a keyboard on a CoCo if you're not going to find an original keyboard. There was that guy on the list, on the CoCo list, who was working on getting membranes made up, but I don't know whatever happened to that.
Yeah, well, well, I don't know that the PS2 adapter is all that expensive. I actually haven't tried to price it out, but Cloud9,
like $50 or so.
Okay, yeah. So Cloud9 has come up with a kit to replace the membrane with switches. So now you can turn a CoCo keyboard into a mechanical keyboard. And I think that's roughly $80 for that kit. The numbers on the membranes, I think I remember hearing at some point in time there's going to be about $60 each to get these membranes made, which is not necessarily cheap. And so an $85 mechanical keyboard replacement compared to a $60 membrane is not a terrible leap in price for an actual upgrade.
I think the key, though, is for things like that, to answer the question, I really think it has more to do with if there was enough people. So if there were 100 people, or let's say 70 people, there were 70 people out there that said, if you could put a motherboard together that had, probably the cool thing would be is to have a CoCo 1, a CoCo 2, and a CoCo 3 with probably an FPGA or CPU, probably an FPGA implementation of the gimme. If you would put that on a motherboard, we would slap down $150 or something to buy that, and it would fit in an existing, like a CoCo 1, 2, or 3 case. I think you'd be done. I think the key is somebody to come and maybe corral those individuals who cared for such a thing, and to say, this is what we want, and then put together a realistic list of things that it should have, and then be done with it.
Modern keyboard, maybe integrated CoCo FPGA.
The problem, what I hear, though, it happens on the list from time to time, is somebody will bring up the idea of doing something, and then the conversation will splinter into like 20 different variations, right? And so then when it splits into those 20 different variations, then the person who started it out is like, oh, this is too complicated, right? I wanted to get to one design so that I had a chance of building it. And then there's like all these people. No, we're gonna need. I
want.
Yeah.
Well,
that's right.
Like that whole thing that I got in trouble with over the multi-pack. I just wanted a simple multi-pack to start with, and then later revisions could add a sound card or could add other things. But I just wanted a debugged and working clone of the multi-pack as a starting point. I was never intending for that to be the end point of it all. I just wanted something as a starting point, and then people could make it better. And that's where I'm saying with a CoCo, let's say call it a CoCo 4, or whatever you want to call it, a CoCo Plus, or maybe appropriate the deluxe CoCo name. If it was just a CoCo compatible with VGA output, so you could use a modern monitor, a PS2 keyboard, an SD card slot. People don't even want floppy drives anymore. All right, no floppy controller, maybe built-in drive wire, and that's it. A nice, start with something simple, and then later on you can do revisions, or you could put a mezzanine slot, like I think Nick wanted. Put a mezzanine slot in so that later you can add things to it by plugging in mezzanine boards.
Yeah, I agree.
That would be great.
I think it's coming up with getting a finite set of things that people can agree on. Enough people can agree on for all the platforms. It's not just that's not specific to Tandy or CoCo. It's just
that's
what it takes. And then once those people are engaged, then the product will materialize.
Right,
Yeah, that 64, that new 64 Reloaded as a model to emulate. I mean, that's exactly what I want to see happen in the CoCo world.
Mm-hmm.
Drop in replacement logic board for a C64. It's amazing.
Now, isn't one of the hurdles, the ROM copyrights like Microsoft and Microware?
Well, in these particular units, what they are doing is, so there's two what he's talking about. There's two different Commodore 64 kind of refreshes. One is called the Commodore 64 Reloaded, which is it just has a bunch of sockets, and then you just actually in that particular case, they've actually licensed the ROMs from an individual called Cloanto. They've got a licensing agreement with the SCOM or Tulip or whoever owns the Commodore intellectual property. But you can do the same thing just by putting a couple empty ROM sockets on the board and saying, hey, dump your favorite ROM on there. The other board is called the C64 Ultimate, which is an FPGA board, but it's sized to fit a Commodore 64 case, and it's got all the same kind of I/O ports on the back. It, I believe, has they've just licensed the ROM, but you could do like people do with MAME and says, hey, if you have a legitimate copy of the ROM, then you can just load it in via this mechanism, and then people could just get the ROMs themselves, however they feel appropriate to grab them.
Well, yeah, with the original Amiga emulators or certain emulators back in the day, the Mac emulators, you'd get software that would let you dump the ROM to a file, you'd transfer it over a serial cable, and then you could put it in the emulator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There was, Nick might know about this. There was a company in Australia called Outbound that made a Macintosh laptop, and you would take your ROMs out of your Mac Plus and put them into the Outbound laptop, and that's how you would turn it into Macintosh compatible.
No, I don't know about that one. I do remember a board for the Amigas called the Implant,
right?
And you plugged it into the Amiga, and it was a Mac emulator in hardware, but the ROMs, you had to take the ROMs out of a real machine and plug them in.
Implant was micro.
I can't remember the name.
It's Jim Drew, who did Fusion PC for the PC, which was a software emulator.
It's pretty well been superseded because Amigas have become much faster, or became much faster, and you could emulate the Mac via software. You didn't need the hardware acceleration. But yeah,
there's an AMAX 2 cartridge on eBay right now.
Oh, really?
Get the money for. Yeah, which is the same idea as the Magic Sack on the ST or the Spectre 128, which would let you plug Mac ROMs into the cartridge port, and then the software would do the rest.
I think what I would like to see, I mean, since kind of we always end up in this whenever we get together and chit chat about stuff, but people continue to focus on, okay, we'll make a better CoCo, so the Mister or CoCo on a chip or CoCo 3 FPGA or whatever, and they're concentrating so heavily on making all kinds of improvements to the CoCo. I think the community at some point is going to have to consider the idea that maybe there needs to be some overlap between the communities. So what would be the value of attaching a 6809 processor or OS 9, right, to a Antic chip or a SID or a VIC-2 or whatever, right? What would be the opportunity of hooking a 6847 to the 6502 or the 65816 and the Apple II GS or whatnot? The dual YM2413s or single or dual out of the Atari ST. What about putting those into another platform like the C128 or the Plus4 or the Atari 130 machine? It seems to me like at some point we're going to get to a point where we want to start mixing and matching the technologies, right?
That's already happened. There's a Nitros 9 board for the Atari 800.
Well, and there's one for the there's one for the Atari, and there's one for, there's Liber 09, right, for the Atari, and there's the mill, which is for the Apple II, and so forth. But it seems to me like what we might end up wanting to do is to build either a representation or a place to put all of those particular components in a board, and then have the board be able to software switch those particular components in and out as one would desire to have them, so that people could play around with the idea of having a mix and match home computer system, right? Yeah. Because people always said, well, the CoCo is great, it's this awesome, we got OS 9, and then the Atari people would say, yeah, but we got player missile graphics, and we've got this cool sound system or whatever, and the Commodore folks is like, don't tell me about that. We've got the SID, right? So it's awesome. And, then you're kind of just back around and you're back where we were in the 80s, where we're all fighting over the fact that we each have a part of the puzzle.
Yeah, I would love to see a SID cartridge for the CoCo. That would be pretty cool.
Well, you could.
The big problem with all that, though, is no software. So even if a SID came out for the CoCo, well, where's the software to run SID software on a CoCo? There isn't any.
No, you're right.
Until someone does. Yeah. It's just a nice piece of hardware doing nothing.
Yeah, I understand. That's the reason I'm thinking what you should do is you should have a board, and that board has a 68000, a 6809, a 6502, and a Z80, all on the board, right? They're all there. And it's got a bunch of memory, and it's got a SID chip, and it's got a 6847, and it's got a VIC-2, and it's got a YM2413 or whatever. And it has like all the parts of a whole bunch of different machines, like whatever the Atari, I don't know the Atari stuff, but whatever the Atari particular chips are, yeah, the Antic and those kind of things, put them all on the board, and so by flipping a switch or something, you boot up as an Atari, but then you can selectively add these additional components to it. What you're saying is nobody wants to program for it because it doesn't exist, and nobody wants to build it because there's no programming for it. So something's got to happen first. It seems like it'd be easier to put a whole machine together and say, you can have all the favorite parts of your machine that you loved back in the day, but you can optionally turn on the SID. I think that would suggest to people like Nick, if you had access to that and you knew that there were 500 or 700 people out there that had that kind of an environment, you'd probably write a piece of software to play with that, because you'd know there'd be a bunch of people that would enjoy it.
Or enhance this earlier software.
Yeah. But
titles.
But again, like have that kind of.
Yeah, you're talking about a retro super system.
That's right. I'm talking about something
kind of like a hardware equivalent of MES, where everything is not just emulated, but a hardware MES system. Yeah.
Well, that C64 Ultimate, the Commodore 64, has multiple chip versions for the SID, for the VIC chip. They're all different, and that board used to be you would set jumpers depending on what version of the chip you plugged in. Now he's got it auto detecting. You just plug the chips in, and you just power the board up, and on boot up, it auto detects what version of which chip you've got in, and it configures itself on the fly.
Yeah, I'm probably talking. I'm not saying that none of this has been done in any capacity. I'm just saying I think the logical
technology's there.
It is.
Someone has to put it together.
Somebody has to put it together. Somebody has to market it, and somebody has to, kind of create it as a product so that it can reach the marketplace and people can kind of enjoy it. Because you're right, Steve. A lot of people are, they're like, I'm not going to do emulation. That's cheating, or that's lame, man. It's either the real hardware or nothing, right?
Well, yeah, that's like Myst. The Myst is emulation.
That's right. So this would be the real hardware. It's like, hey, you have a real, and you could have a situation where you could have it all implemented in FPGA, but if you want to use a real, use a real gimme, there's a socket on the board, and you could put a real gimme in there. And so when you're done, you could set it up so that it looks exactly and runs exactly like a CoCo 3, and you're good.
And you wouldn't have to worry about FPGA cores having exact timing, because you'd have the correct CPU on the board.
That's right. You would. So anyway, something to think about.
Neat idea. Yeah, so Garrett Myers chimed in on Facebook. He says, we need to go back to the S100 bus based systems. It's a common backplane with different personality cards for different systems.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And it was the old school version of that, because there's a 6502 card, there's an 8080 card, Z80 card, 68,000 card.
cloned an entire Model 1 on S100 boards.
Wow.
It was
That's pretty
amazing.
cool. Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's nice to kind of theorize what would be cool, and as you guys pointed out, the minute somebody wants to suggest this or start thinking about it or doing it, then you get a million opinions, you get feature creep.
Then you get that CoCo 4 explosion where everyone goes bananas, and then nobody wants to talk about it for a year.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, if you had the perfect product, how many people are going to buy it? And what's So
and year after year, to be honest, we just lost Fred Durda. We're all kind of dying off, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think there's almost like there's the purist market who wants real hardware and wants it to be the same form factor as just genuine replacement parts. So like a modern version of new original stock, right? We don't have a motherboard, but we're going to make a new modern motherboard just to replace this. That would be nice to be able to provide those parts, but the cost of doing it's almost like we started off talking about the GoFundMe that Atari's doing right now. As a market test, how many people would actually say they want to buy this? Put your money where your mouth is, and so Atari's got 10,000 people saying they want to buy a new Atari VCS. So if you did this GoFundMe, and how many people are going to put up the money to make a CoCo 3 motherboard? At that point, you know what your funding is, you know how much money you have, you know how many units you're going to sell, and maybe you go ahead and you go to market with it, I haven't been in the retro hobby that long, and I've only been in the CoCo world for a couple of years. Everybody's got to go, it seems like. So Javier just left. Jim's saying he's got to go. So yeah, these are great topics, and this has been a good show. And we're going on 3 hours now, so it's midnight here in Florida. So it's probably a good enough time to wrap this up. So definitely a good time to wrap it up after 3 hours of just talking retro things. I want to thank everybody who was here. I know Nick, you came in kind of late since we've been around for a while, but Nick Marentes in Australia, Jim Brain from Retro Innovations, retro.com for all his stuff. Jason, the CoCo Man Reighard, the maker of the Switcheroo.
Yes.
CoCo3ScartCable.com, and Al Hartman has been here. Javier Rivera was with us earlier. Grant Leighty was with us earlier. Steve Bjork was at the beginning of the call. Ron Delvaux was here. We've had a ton of people in the live chat, both on Facebook and on YouTube, and a few people chiming in from Twitch. So I am multi-streaming through the multiverse, and I want to thank everybody who's watched us. And this has just been a kind of a obviously very free-form, fluid discussion about a lot of different topics, but this show is kind of a variation of our show we host weekly called CoCoTALK, right? So CoCoTALK, we mostly talk about the CoCo, the color computer, the Tandy color computer, but we often include other systems on our CoCoTALK show. In this format and this show here, RetroTALK, we want to do more often, where we can talk about all kinds of stuff, because there's a lot of us who like a lot of different things, and so I think this was good. The fact that we sat here and pontificated for 3 hours shows that there's plenty of hot air to fill this balloon. So
and we barely scratched.
I have my fluid right here.
I've been your host. I am Steve Strowbrige on YouTube. I call myself the original gamer, Stevie Stroh. I play retro video games. My first computer was a Tandy color computer. That's near and dear to me. That's my childhood first love. So I also host a CoCoTALK show on Saturdays. And I want to thank everybody for watching us, and we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thanks, Al, for joining us. This is great to have you on the show and just be able to, talk tech.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it, and it was really great to meet, at least vocally, all the great people that I've been conversing with on the various boards and lists.
Sure. And you got to join us. I don't know if you're free Saturday afternoons, but we do CoCoTALK every Saturday. So
yeah, sure. I'll be there.
All right, sounds good. All right, guys. So we're gonna wrap this up. Actually, let's just do one more thing before we go. I'm not gonna play any outro or closing credits or anything, but we're gonna promote a world premiere that's gonna happen next Saturday. So we're very fortunate on CoCoTALK that we get to actually be the launch pad for a lot of products and things that are happening. So there's a new CoCo project that's happening right now in our community that's called CoCo Forever by Bruce Moore out of O Canada. And it is a audio drama. So it's almost like the old radio serials where he's come up with this concept and this story related around the color computer universe. And we've been teasing this for a while, and next Saturday on our show, live at 2 p.m. Eastern, will be the world premiere of the first episode of CoCo Forever. So everybody's going to hear it first, and they're going to hear it on our show. So let me play this little quick teaser clip here of CoCo Forever, and just to get an idea of what this new project is going to be like, and it's pretty cool. So give it a look, give it a listen.
How does it feel? I'm still believing.
What if you could go back in time to just the right moment and ensure that Tandy won?
You definitely earned this office.
Thank you. Yes, you're too kind.
Oh, I'm much happier breaking stuff. Life has been a dream.
But what if you went back to the wrong moment?
Give me that. How do you even know what that was?
Listen, I don't really care about these blueprints. I just want...
Say, who are you? You want to spy for Commodore or something, are you?
Just move! Oh. Hey, hold the elevator! Hold the
Stop right there!
Whoa, no need for guns, no need for guns!
So, Mr. Anders, it seems you have stumbled upon my little secret. There is no point in waiting for security. I think you are about to have an accident.
Okay, no!
CoCo Forever? Spring-ish 2018.
There you go. There's nothing like a nice little production there to whet the appetite, to get people interested in what is this going to be like? What is this going to be about? So,
yeah. I think I heard some very familiar voices there.
He spared no expense in procuring voice talent. So,
no, that's not. I heard people from this show on there.
So scratch the word talent.
Yeah.
Oh no, that was great. I loved it.
Yeah. So yeah, Bruce is
back to the retro.
Yeah. I mean, nothing gets more retro than like a radio serial, where you're just doing this audio drama. It's kind of cool. And I like the Back to the Future theme, back to retro. What if? I mean, I think that's a common theme we think about all the time, man. Like Jason earlier was saying, man, I bought all this stuff 20 years ago. I bought a whole system for $20, What if you could go back in time and not sell all the stuff you regret selling? What if you could, go back in time and write that hit song, or make that hit game or whatever it was? There's so many things you could say. What if I coulda, shoulda, woulda? And the neat thing about being in the retro hobby is, in some respects, we can say, listen, the things I wish I did then or things we could have done then, well, let's do them now. Because now we don't have to worry about, Evil Corp telling us that we got to crank this out in 20 days, and we can take our time and really make a project the way we want it and try to push the limits and not just crank things out for a profit. So I think we're seeing more innovation and higher quality retro hardware and software now than when, retro was new. So it's just, I think it's a common theme. If I, as my spiritual mentor Cher would say, if we could turn back time, what would we do? So, good. So good show. Thanks for being here. We're an international audience. We had Nick from Australia, we had all over the place, California. Where are you at, Al? Where do you hail from?
I'm in Keensburg, New Jersey, right by the water park.
New Jersey, what exit?
Yeah, what exit? 117 on the Garden State.
All right, good deal. And we had there's too many people to mention in the live chat because there's just, but yeah, I'll just talk about the ones who I can still see on the screen here. So obviously Al Hartman was here. Al says, what's the website to the switcheroo?
I got it.
You got it, right? So Brian.
I got it. I'm bookmarking it now. I'm going to save my pennies and get one.
Brian Mathern, I hope I pronounced your name properly. And Garrett Myers was here. And Jason's brother Ken was in the live chat. Bunch of people on YouTube. Nick Marotta was on earlier. Curtis Boyle was here. Grant Leighty was here. Tons of people in the live chat. So we've had a very, very busy chat, and I have tried to acknowledge people when I could, but yeah, there's been a lot of chat. So I do want to thank everybody who watched and was chatting along with us in the text chat. And let's do this again. And for those of you who are new to this show and this idea, you know, we do a weekly show called CoCoTALK. You can find out about that at CoCoTALK.live. This has been a retro talk, but hopefully this is not the last one we do, and hopefully more people will tune into our live video show that we call CoCoTALK, that also becomes an audio and video podcast available wherever free podcasts are sold. Look for CoCoTALK in your favorite podcast player. Any closing thoughts or arguments from the remaining panel? Nick Marentes.
No, nothing for me. Yeah, that's it.
All right, Brian Mathern says I did pronounce it correctly. That's good. Coco Man, everything good with you?
Everything's great. You know, you've already said CoCo3ScartCable.com, and if anyone's interested in my blog, which is, you know, well, there hasn't been a lot of time to spend on the blog lately building cables, but I have mentioned, well, cocoman.org is my blog.
CocoMan.org. It's a non-profit organization.
Yeah, I'm not trying to sell anything on there. If you want to buy something, then it's cocoman.biz or coco3scartcable.com.
All right, and Al Hartman.
Shameless plug.
Al Hartman, parting thoughts? Anything you want to plug before we sign off here? Al, you still there?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I hit the mute so I wouldn't interfere. The only thing I have to plug is the Coco Man cable, because I'm putting that on my Computer Place Facebook page, because I think that's a must-have.
And why don't you tell us what your Facebook page is, too, if people want to hunt that down and take a look at it?
Well, it's just called the Computer Place, and you'll see a really bad picture of me with my original Model 1 trying to fix it. It's still broken. If you're out there and you can fix a Model 1 and you live near exit 117 on the Garden State, drop me a line, because I would love to have someone help me fix my original Model 1, which I still have. It got during a move and now it doesn't work.
Have you reached out to the trash talkers like Ian Maverick and Peter Bartlett? They seem to...
Well, to ship it to Australia, I guess.
Well, I think Peter Bartlett's stateside.
Yeah, Peter's very busy on his MIRE, the MIRE, the Model 1 replacement expansion interface, and the MISE, the Model 3. He makes some amazing stuff. I wish I had the money for his Model 1 expansion interface.
Yeah.
That's really neat.
Oh, so Brian, who's been with us this whole time, says he's got a book. So let's talk about that real quick. So Brian's book is called The Atari 2600 Homebrew Companion, Volume 1. It's available on Amazon in black and white paperback. It's available as an ebook in Kindle and in full color paperback. And so the full color cover is the profile pic. So let's take a look at Brian's profile pic real quick here, if we can. So let me see if I can make that any bigger. I think I can. So let's go over here to full screen. You've been with us for a while. We might as well give you a plug here. So here we go. It's the Atari 2600 Homebrew Companion Volume 1 Deluxe Edition by Brian Mathern. So check that out on Amazon and other places like that. And he says he's currently also working on Volume 2. Cool. Thanks for sharing that with Brian. Brian, if you want to come on next time and talk about it, if you want to join us on Skype, talk about your book, talk about the Atari, I'd love to have you join us on the panel on the Skype call too. But we've definitely appreciated having you be here in chat form. Good stuff. All right, so Al Hartman's Computer Place, look for that on Facebook. Check that out. He's always got cool pictures and cool discussions on lots of vintage systems. And that's about it. And so, yeah.
More contributions. Come all and contribute.
Yeah, post some pictures of your vintage stuff, right? So, yeah. And, so to find out more about our show, CoCoTALK, just go to CoCoTALK.live, or, we got a Facebook page and all that kind of stuff, too. And love to continue these conversations each and every week. So we're going to sign off, man. Thanks, guys. Thank you all for being here in the panel. Thank you, everybody who watched us on YouTube and on Facebook and other places. So that's it, man. No credits, no outro. Just thank you and good night and peace out, everybody. And
press the button, Frank.
Right.
I'm going to quote John Linville, and I'm not sure if this is his quote or if he got it from someone else, but he says, "You may only be young once, but you can be retro forever." So stay retro, people.